Good morning, everyone. All right, let's get started. So, good to see everyone. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I have it up on screen, so I'll be able to answer them as we go forward. So, this stream, and if you can't hear me, please let me know. This stream is going to be going over interviewing basics and hopefully do a couple of mock interviews, depending on how many people we have show up. So, interviewing basics, we're going to get right into it. There are several kinds of interviews that you are going to run into during your hiring period, or during the period in between kind of initially reaching out and getting an offer. The recruiter screen is usually a very quick 15-30 minute call with a non-technical recruiter. The tech screen is usually more like an hour long, though sometimes they are 45 minutes. That will be with an engineer or manager and will cover technical issues. Culture screens are with a variety of people. I've had culture screens with designers, I've had culture screens with product managers, engineers, um, CEOs, CTOs. It kind of depends on who just is interested in finding out how you work as a person. Um, and then there's take home projects. Take home projects are actually very similar to what we did during boot camp with the challenges. They are often medium sized projects. Sometimes they come with starter code, sometimes they expect you to build up code yourself. You're usually given, most of the ones I've done, you're given a variable amount of time where they just say, hey, get it back to us whenever you're done, whenever you're ready. One of the issues with that, though, is if you take too long, they start getting suspicious and start wondering what's going on. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. They do give you as much time as you want in a lot of cases, but sometimes they they expect you to have it done in a certain amount of time. Um, One thing that I actually forgot to put on here is there are a version of tech screens where it's an automated tech screen, and so you're not actually doing an interview with a person. Instead, it's more of a like a program or a website that you'll go to that'll ask you a bunch of questions and there's certain answers. It's a little bit like leak code mixed with like a multiple choice Canvas question thing. So there are some multiple choice questions. There are like write code questions that then will be run against checks. Sometimes you'll get one, sometimes you get multiple. So that's just a variant. Some companies that are hiring a lot or have less personnel available will do that. It's not the most ideal because interviewees can cheat on it. And so I haven't run into it in many like well-established companies, but a lot of smaller ones will do it. So recruiter screen, usually the recruiter screen is the first step in the hiring process. You'll get a recruiter screen after you either fill out your form on their website or a recruiter reaches out to you and you say, yes, I'm interested. It's a preliminary screen. The reason is engineers are expensive and recruiters are cheap. And whether or not that's is the way it should be, that's how it is. And so a lot of the times they will screen you just to make sure that you're worth pushing forward to a like an engineering screen, because an engineering screen is going to cost the company more money. Oftentimes it's 15 minutes to half an hour. They may ask some technical questions. The important thing to be aware of if they're asking technical questions is most, if not all, recruiters are not technical. They do not have a background really in engineering. Unless you're lucky enough to be at a very, very early stage startup, where your recruiter screen's being done by like the CTO, but that's kind of rare because even then they often have a third party recruiting company that's working with them. The recruiters are kind of judged based on their efficiency to send qualified candidates up the pipeline. So they often will err on the side of rejection if they don't think that you're going to move forward because that looks badly on them. So they're more interested in rejecting someone who could be qualified than letting someone through who won't be qualified. And a lot of the hiring pipeline is like that. The difference is recruiters don't generally understand the technical questions they're asking you. So if you got an engineer who's asking their technical question, they will understand what that question is. They will understand the necessary algorithms for it. They will probably have solved it themselves a couple times. They know what it is. The recruiters do not, because remember, they're not technical people. And so what they're doing is they've got a technical question for you, and they've got a list of various keywords or buzzwords that they're expecting to hear. Um, and so if you don't meet enough of those buzzwords, they don't actually understand what your answer is. They're not going to necessarily understand if it makes sense or not. And so, and again, this is only if they're asking you technical questions. Other questions, recruiters are they're just people like us. They're fully capable of understanding those answers. But for technical stuff specifically, they're looking for very specific answers. So if you are answering a technical question for the recruiter, be as much by the book as possible. Um, like as much of a textbook answer as you can, because that's what they're looking for. And sometimes it's hard to know what that textbook answer is. So generally, as many buzzwords as you think are appropriate for that answer and make sense, throw them out. Most of the recruiter screens I've had recently, though, have been more about background. Um, and that's again because I've had some work experience, so they're less worried about figuring out technical know-how. But a lot of them are going to be like, okay, what was your education like? Tell me about that. Tell me a little bit about what you did at your previous job. Um, Stuff like that. They're basically trying to gauge whether or not it seems like you know what you're doing. Again, this is a lower level screen. So as long as you tick enough of their boxes, they're going to move you forward. The problem is just ticking those boxes, because sometimes knowing what boxes they have, the boxes the recruiters have are not the boxes that you think they're going to have, basically. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the recruiter screen. The thing is, a lot of people, especially early on, bootcamp grads, junior engineers, they fail the recruiter screen, and they're perfectly capable of programming. It's just the recruiter doesn't believe that. And the problem you run into, right, is that the recruiter doesn't know how to tell that, and it's always the fact that they didn't get the answer they're expecting. Now, as an engineer, if I get an answer that I'm not expecting, I'm still going to judge whether or not it was correct, because correctness and what I'm expecting are not going to be the same thing, but for recruiters, they are the same thing. So if you're noticing you're not passing past the recruiter screens a lot, take note of what questions they're asking you and kind of look up what the textbook answers to those questions are. And that can be really helpful to getting past that, because once you get past the recruiter screen, engineers grade harsh, but we also are technical, so we understand better what you're actually trying to do. So yeah, that's the recruiter screen. It's like a very early stage in the process, but it's like that's the funnel, right? They're trying to weed out as many people that funnel as possible. Tech screen can involve multiple technical questions. Sometimes it's one technical question that has multiple parts. Sometimes it's a bunch of different questions that they'll just rapid fire at you. Oftentimes there's two ways you'll get into a tech screen. One is right after the recruiter screen. Oftentimes you'll be doing a tech screen, and it'll be like over a video call. I've even had a long time ago, I had some over the phone where someone was just asking me questions over the phone, and I was answering them. Those are not as popular anymore because we've got a lot of good tooling. A lot of them will be in HackerRank, CodePen, things like that. And so there can be a call, like an hour-long call after the recruiter screen, that is just, let's do another funnel check, right? So they're going to just ask you some basic questions and make sure you actually have some familiarity with code. This will almost always be given by an engineer or a manager, someone who is familiar with technology. Sometimes it involves multiple people. That can be for a number of reasons. One, because someone's shadowing an interview. And shadowing an interview is something you might run into at various points, where they'll be like, yeah, this is, Bob, he's shadowing this interview. What that means is Bob is not trained on how to interview at that company yet, or maybe how to interview at all. So Bob is there. Bob is probably a good engineer, but Bob doesn't know how to interview there yet. So Bob is learning how to interview from the person who's actually giving the interview. You should still be very polite to Bob. You should still treat Bob as if they were an interviewer, because oftentimes they are actually providing feedback on you. In fact, at the company I work at, We have a grading rubric, and failure to recognize or acknowledge a shadow interview docks points off the rubric because it's just rude, you know? Um, they a lot of times have a theme. The one that you get at the very, like right after the recruiter call, if you get one, is not often going to be, it's usually going to be like a very simple algorithm or coding. But if you get the later on during the main interview day, they will have multiple tech screens, and some of them will be based on algorithms, some of them will be based on architecture, some of them will just be general coding, see if you can solve a problem. Each at a company that has its shit together, each person will have talked with all the others and said, what should I interview on? And sometimes they'll even have been assigned a topic and a pool of questions to ask. um, as junior engineers, you're not as likely to get very heavy software architecture questions, but you may get something around like how would you structure the APIs in a backend, for instance, like that. You might get some soft ones like that. I wouldn't expect to be getting some seriously heavy ones because junior engineers are not expected to do heavy architecture. But yeah, the last thing on this, the interviewer is going to understand their question completely. The question that I ask when I'm not required to ask another one, I have asked probably over 100 times. I know every single answer to that question. Um, I know every single possible way that someone could go wrong in that question. What that means is you cannot fool your interviewer. Don't try. They will know and they will be upset. If you don't know something, tell them you don't know. That is usually, people are usually okay with that. Um, if if your interviewer asks you, "Are you sure?" Pay attention to that because they may have noticed you're going off down the wrong path. They may also just be trying to throw you off your game. The interviewers will do that. But it may mean that they've noticed something that is somewhat problematic that you're doing, and they kind of want to help you out, and they're like, "Hey, you know, you should really check this." If you hear your interviewer say, "Are you sure?" Double check your algorithm, run through it in your head, visualize, verbalize your thoughts. Say, "Okay, so let me check this. Then this is why I'm doing X. I'm doing Y. I'm doing this. I'm doing that." Because maybe if you're still okay with that, cool. And maybe the interviewer is like, "Oh yeah, okay, they do understand what they're doing." Maybe you just weren't verbalizing what you were doing. Always be verbalizing your thought process during the tech screen because the interviewer needs to know what you're thinking. Their goal is not to find out whether or not you can code the thing they asked you to code in 45 minutes. Their goal is to find out how you would work on a team and how well you approach problems because that is what they need to know in order to determine whether or not they want to move forward. Culture screens. Culture screens are controversial. We'll get into why in a little bit, but companies still do them. The company I'm at specifically looks for what they call culture add rather than culture fit, which is, I don't know how well they actually succeed at that, but it's kind of an idea of like, we want a diverse group of people on the team. It's intended to determine if you fit well. There are some software engineers out there who are absolutely brilliant, amazing at what they do. They can code this stuff backwards and forwards, and they are terrible people to work with. Nobody wants to work with them. And companies in the past, they had that 10x engineer. They wanted the 10x engineer, and there's still some companies that do, but a lot of companies have realized that if you get that 10x engineer, you actually lose productivity because not only does everyone else have to figure out how they work, everyone else has to work with them, and people quit. You will get people that were okay engineers. They weren't 10x, but they weren't bad, and they will quit just because they don't want to deal with that person. Um, Companies very much don't want that because it's very hard to fire engineers. It's really hard to get rid of us, and the market doesn't like it if you're getting rid of engineers just because, even if they're horrible people to work with. So culture screens are kind of the idea is to prevent that, is to figure out if someone can work on a team and works well with people. So culture screen is the time to show your best self. If you get a culture screen, it's the time to be like, "Hey, I am normal enough to work with you," because that's what they're looking for. And that's also why they're controversial. It's often with the actual manager that you'll be working with because, or the CEO, CTO. Sometimes it's with product manager, sometimes it's with design as well. Because the manager and those people have to work with you on a non-technical level. And the manager also knows what kind of company or team they're trying to build. So the manager may say they want really high energy individuals. So they're going to find out if you're high energy. They may want more steady, like people that are just going to, put in their 40 hours every week, but they're never going to complain about anything. And so they'll screen for that. So a lot of it is they're trying to build a certain culture at the company or the team, and they want to see if you fit within that, or if you will add to that in a positive way. Generally, they want to make sure you're not a crazy person. Um, and or rather, because we're engineers, we're all a little nuts. They want to make sure that you are the right kind of crazy for them. They want to make sure that you will fit in. If you're joining a gaming company, just because you're joining a gaming company doesn't mean everyone on the team is a gamer. So they might be looking for someone who plays a lot of video games, for example, or they might be looking for someone who doesn't. They might be saying, okay, we know we're a gaming company, but most of our team doesn't play video games and we don't like to talk about it because we work on the payment architecture system. That's a thing, especially at bigger companies. So that's kind of what that's for. It can be used by hiring managers to not hire people for arbitrary reasons, which is the reason it's controversial. You can get a manager. They will never say this because it's illegal, but they might just decide, I don't want to hire a woman on my team. And you will get a response from your recruiter saying, we didn't think you were a culture fit. And that's just it. And it's shitty. And a lot of people know this is a problem, and that's why culture screens are controversial, and companies try to phase them out, or they're trying to make them standardized, so like they always ask the same questions, because they don't want to be open to lawsuits, pretty much. I mean, it's not really that they're trying to do the right thing, it's that they don't want to get sued. And so that can happen. I've been rejected from a company once when I had a culture screen and they said I was too rude. Granted, I may have been rude. Um, so that was reasonable, but it also may have been they just didn't like me. I had a culture screen once where they didn't like how I talked about a former employer. Um, yeah, sometimes. Yeah, sometimes it's a legitimate, like, you wouldn't have fit in with that team culture where they're like, yeah, our team culture is we drink heavily at work, after work, we don't have social lives, we are in the office 80 hours a week. And I would not fit in with that culture. And so sometimes it's legitimate, and that's the problem with culture screens is it's really hard to determine whether or not it's legitimate, like actual you wouldn't fit in well with the culture, or it's a they just didn't like you and are bigoted. The other problem too is sometimes the culture is actually toxic and they need people who are different in the culture to fit in, right? Like this is the problem with gender minorities and racial minorities in STEM. Sometimes companies need that. Um, yeah, and unfortunately, the in the chat, I wish they put that in the requirements. I don't know if it's legal though. It is not, at least in tech. I think there's a couple industries where there are. As far as I know, it is not legal to put specific requirements like quotas for various people. You can tell your recruiters that that's definitely you want those candidates, and you can make the hiring process more inclusive to them. And that's what a lot of companies are trying to do. And part of that is removing stuff like culture screens or making them a little bit more objective. But yeah, you may still run into a culture screen. That is a thing that may still happen. And if you do get to a culture screen, you can tell it's a culture screen because it will be usually with non-technical people and or management, and they're not asking you tech questions. They're just, let's go for a walk, or they're going to sit down and they're going to describe a situation to you that doesn't seem completely technical in nature. Or they may be asking you a bunch of like soft questions. Answer the best you can. Um, I would say if you know that you have a little bit of trouble with social interactions, like I do personally, keep that in mind. Try to downplay that. Don't lie about it. Like if someone asks me what is an interaction you had with a coworker at a previous job that was negative, I am going to tell them an honest story, but I'm also going to tell them how I grew from that experience because that's what they're looking for. Bear in mind that they're just looking for that human connection. And so if you can get a good human connection with them in a culture screen, you're probably going to be okay. All right, general flow of hiring. This looks really wacky. There we go. This looks a little crazy, but that's because I ran out of space. So your profile is entered into the recruiting system. A lot of times, that's like Workday is a big one that companies use. There's a bunch of smaller ones as well. You're not going to need to worry about that too much. This could be a number of different things. This could be um, where you had a recruiter reach out to you and you responded back to them and you said, yes, I'm interested. And they asked you a bunch of questions and they put it in. That can happen a couple ways. If you're working with a third party recruiter, that is a recruiter not affiliated directly with the company, who doesn't work directly with the company you're applying to, they may have multiple jobs. So they may actually ask you some questions ahead of time and have your resume, and they will actually work to put you into the recruiting system. So those questions that you fill out where you're like, I just gave you my resume. Why are you making me fill out my full address and all my education details again? A recruiter will do that for you if they've reached out to you because they know that they reached out to you. Um, yes, take home projects. We'll talk about those. They're not as bad usually. Um, Sometimes it's that you filled out a form on their website or their hiring portal, and that put an initial query of interest into their recruiting system. And whenever that happens, your profile gets entered, it gets assigned to a recruiter. And it may not be the same recruiter that is going to take you through the full process. Sometimes it's just an intake recruiter, but a lot of times you'll get a recruiter that will just manage your profile through the full process, which is good because that's the person you reach out to. They will generally reach out to you for the initial recruiter screen. You schedule that, and then you do that recruiter screen with them. If you pass that, there's two options. Some companies will send you into a take-home project immediately. Some companies will put you through a technical screen, a 1 hour, 45-minute technical screen, usually over phone or video call. After that technical screen, sometimes you will also get a take-home project, but sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll go to the final interview. So there's multiple stages, right? So sometimes it's take-home project, then technical screen, then final interview. Sometimes it's technical screen, take-home project, final interview. That part, this part here is a little bit more nebulous in the order in which it goes in, and sometimes you'll only get the technical screen, sometimes you'll only get the take-home project. Sometimes the recruiter will be impressed enough that you'll just go straight to the final interview, or if they're desperate enough for workers. So it's kind of nebulous, but it usually follows this pattern. The final interview, this is going to be multiple technical screens and cultural screens. It is usually 4 to 6 hours. Oftentimes, nowadays they do it over video screens a lot, especially if you're doing a remote position. If you're not in a remote position, they may have you come into the office. That wasn't super popular over the last couple of years, but it is more popular now. So, because people are going back to work. Also depends on the company. A lot of times, especially if you're like out of state, they will do it over the phone. But a lot of times they want to meet you. They will feed you during this period. Oftentimes it involves a team lunch. The important thing about the team lunch, that is also a cultural screen. You may think, oh, the team just going out to lunch, it's a cool time to chill. No, they are all evaluating you at that point, and they will be asked by their manager, what did you think of this candidate? And that is going to be, do they think you're someone that they can work with? And because you get a lot when you're eating lunch with people, but it's a nice experience to, even if you don't pass the interview, getting to this point is good because it means that they thought that you could pass the interview. There was a good chance that you could, or else they wouldn't have brought you in. Each one of these steps, you only get past this point if they think there's a good chance that or they only get to that point if they think there's a good chance you're going to pass it. If they think that you're probably not going to pass, they don't move you forward. But yeah, final interview, you'll meet your manager. You'll often tour the offices. You'll talk about what they do. They'll show you cool stuff. They'll show you the perks. Because the important thing is you are interviewing them too. They want you to come work there. So even if they don't hire you, they want you to tell your friends, oh yeah, it was the coolest office I've ever been in, so that your friends want to work there. Networking is really important for them. So everyone's going to be on their best behavior, usually. Um, And you should be too, because everyone's going to be watching you. You don't necessarily know who is interviewing you and who is not. The person who greets you at the front desk and brings you back into the interview office, they may be interviewing you too. If you're rude to them, they may decide that you're not moving forward. So definitely, it's a very important to put your best foot forward at all times and assume you're always going to be under evaluation. So after you get through that whole flow, final interview, you're going to be exhausted by the end of it. Sometimes at bigger companies, they'll like give you something. They'll give you like a notebook or a pen or like some cool thing, like some sticker. When I interviewed at Riot Games, they actually gave me some Riot points for my league account, so that was kind of fun because it's cheap for them, right? They don't care. Um, so that can be something too. You know, just it doesn't happen everywhere, but this is your chance. The final interview is your chance to yeah, I thought some of you would be excited about that. This is your chance to really check the vibe of the company. So like one of the companies I worked at, Zoom Pizza, I walked in and they were legitimately working in a warehouse. It had been a flower warehouse, and I thought this is the coolest building I've ever been in. I really want to work in this building. Company turned out to be a little less cool after a while, but it was in the beginning. So, you know, do your vibe check. You start to learn what is good and what is bad and what are the red flags over time as you start doing more interviews, learning in more places. Um, I don't remember where exactly it was I was interviewing at, but at some point there was a manager who had been a manager for 4 months and had been a junior engineer before that. Big red flag. Not a good sign. A company, if they don't have any good internal management criteria or candidates, they should hire from outside because you need a good manager in positions, especially as you're growing. Anyway, I think, yep, that's the last slide. All right, so let's pull this over here. Let's talk a little bit about actually interviewing. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up a question, and I'm just going to kind of act as if I was interviewing, answering that question. All right. So what I've done is I just looked up a leak code question. This is the palindrome number. Given an integer x, return true if x is a palindrome and false otherwise. So generally what you would get in this case is you would have all of this. Your interviewer would tell you this. They would say, okay, so I've got a question for you. Go ahead and get your code editor ready. So in this, a lot of times, if you're using CoderPad or HackerRank, they will actually have given you a link that you need to log into. And the reason for that, especially with HackerRank, which I think is really cool, it actually remembers what keystrokes you did in real time and saves a video of it. So if the interviewer is like, oh, I don't remember why they did this, they can actually go back in time and they can see why you did the things you did and when you did them, which can be kind of useful for them. What you should not do if you are working remotely, you should not cover your camera. Good morning, Minnie Grace. You should not cover your camera. You should not at any point go on mute because that is very suspicious. It has never happened to me, but I had someone mention where they were asking someone a question, and every time they asked a person a question, they would go like this for like 5 minutes and go completely on mute, and then they come back and just paste a block of code into the shared editor. Very suspicious. And the thing is, as technical interviews, we can fail you for that. If we are suspicious that you are cheating, we will fail you, and we don't need to have a very good reason for it. We could just show up and be like, oh, this person looked like they were cheating. I don't know if I can trust any of the work they did. I'm going to fail them. We should not move forward on them. Don't give them any reason for that. Be above the board. Make sure that your video, that they can see you at all times. If your video goes out and they mention it, don't just ignore that question. Be like, oh, my video went out. You're absolutely right. My video went out. Let me see what I can do to fix that and try to get that back. Make sure that you're always narrating your thoughts, letting them know what you're doing. So, for example, in this case, the interviewer would probably, if it was CoderPad or HackerRank, they would just paste the examples and stuff into that chat so that I had it available. In this case, I'm just going to grab these. Oftentimes, they'll give you examples too. And I'm just going to paste them into let's see. Let me open up class activity. Yeah, I remember class activity, right? Let's do interview. No, not that. Prep.js. Yes, I know I spelled it wrong. All right, so I'm going to put comment. And so if I was just given a prompt, this is what I would do as well. So I would just put the comment and I would put this in here. Given a integer, x is a palindrome. Oh God, where's my cursor? And false otherwise. So what's the first thing that we have to do here? The first thing that we're going to do, and so now I'm going to transition into how I would read this as a candidate. So I'm going to be talking to you like you're the interviewer, giving me this interview. Okay, so the problem is, given an integer x, return true if x is a palindrome and false otherwise. We got a couple examples here. So in this, let's see, in this example, let me just structure this a little bit so it's easier for me to read. In this example, okay, we have x 1, 2, 1. This is true because 1, 2, 1 is a palindrome. Negative 1, 2, 1 is not, because this becomes that. What that tells me is that the negative sign counts. So that's important for me to know because otherwise I would just assume maybe this is just a number. I just need to check the number, but no, I need to check this negative sign. So that's really good for me to know. That basically tells me that this number needs to be treated like a string, which I kind of knew anyways, because palindrome, but this is a good example. I like this example. 10, this is not a palindrome because, it's not. So the first thing I would do going about solving this is I know that I need to figure out if x is a palindrome, and I can't really do that on a number, so I'm going to convert it to a string. So let me put a function in here, is number palindrome number. Okay, so the first thing I want to turn this into a string, and I'm just going to do that with the backticks. There's probably a couple other ways. There might be... I could also add empty quotes to it to turn into a string, but this is just the most common method I'm comfortable with. So I'm going to turn that into a string because we can't, if you have just a number, at least in JavaScript, we can't figure out if a number is a palindrome because we don't have individual little characters of it. Well, I guess the thing is we could. So what we could do is we could look at the digits individually using some math to pull out those digits and verify that those are there. But I think that is probably a bigger pain than just turning it into a string, and I don't think that the runtime is going to be significantly different. So I'm going to try that, and then maybe if I need to fall back on actually doing the numeric mathematical stuff, I will, because numeric mathematical stuff is kind of fun, but I think it's going to be more complicated. All right, so then let's check a palindrome. How do I check a palindrome? Basically, there's two cases for a palindrome. There's going to be stuff like 1, 2, 1 and 1, 2, 2, 1. And in the case of 1, 2, 1, the middle character, it doesn't really matter what it is because there's nothing to match it against. A palindrome, that's odd length, you only need to care about the characters on the sides. And so this particular character here, I don't actually have to care. With these ones, though, I do need to care because the 2 has to match the 2, the 1 has to match the 1, because it's even length. What that means is that I can loop over half of the string and check it against the other half, and I should be safe with that. If I take half the string and round it down, that is perfectly fine for evens because they don't need to round. For odds, you would end up rounding. The thing is, let's say I have here, rounded down on 3 is 1, so if I check this first character here, rounding down cuts out the middle character. However, we don't care about the middle character in a odd length palindrome because it has nothing to match against, so we don't even need to bother checking it. So rounding down should be safe in that case. So what I'm going to do, let's see, I less than math.floor. So rather than round, I'm actually just going to floor it because if you round up, you actually end up rounding up in some case. I think technically in this case you probably would never. Well, no, let's talk about that in a minute because that's kind of interesting. In this case, this is going to be 1.5, and the round on math will round up in that case. because 0.5 is usually considered to round up. Well, I'm pretty sure in JavaScript it rounds up. And that in that case actually would become 2, and that would be problematic because if I loop over 1, 2, there's not a second character to actually check against. Though, if I'm using multiple pointers, like I'm planning to do here, and start to finish, they actually will end up being the same thing, because in 1 here, so let's say I start off with 1, 0, and then the last character, and then if I go to 2 and I decrement that pointer by 1, they're both 2 because they're at the same point. Let me actually write out an example of that because that was a little confusing. I'm going to do a larger one. So the first character, we start at 0. Our character is 1 and 1. We check that, right? So our pointers are going to be here, here, and here. Okay, so then we go to 1. Our pointer moves in here and in here. And then, so then we have 2 and 2. Now, if we're using a floor, we're done because we've got 2. We don't need to check the middle one. If we're using round, it rounds up. We end up with 3. But here's the thing. We increment that pointer and we decrement the other pointer, and they both end up in the middle anyway. So it shouldn't technically matter if we're using round or floor, but I'm actually just going to go with floor just because I think that is going to be a little less confusing to work through. If someone else is running this algorithm, I think they would expect it to be a floor, and so they might be confused if round showed up. So what I'm going to do, numstring.length, oops, not last index, divided by 2, I++. And so now what I want to do is I want to find my end index. Now my end index is always going to be the last index of the string minus I. And so that way, as I advances, that last index decrements. Now, the last index is not going to be string.length. It's going to be string.length minus 1 because strings are 0 indexed. So I'm going to say last index equals numstring.length minus 1 minus I. So that way, as I increment, the last index decrements. Then I have to check the characters and see if they're the same. So if numstring I is not equal to numstring, that is not what I want, last index, then I'm going to return false. The reason I can return false there is if any of these don't match, then I know immediately it's not a palindrome, and I don't need to bother checking the rest. I can use this double or the triple equal syntax here. Well, the exclamation and double equals, because these are both going to be characters, which means they will be the same type because I'm working off of the same string. And at the end here, I'm just going to return true. Okay, so I think this is good. Let me just run through this with one of these examples. So let's say 1, 2, 1. All right, so we start off with our string 1, 2, 1, 0. Numstring divided by .length divided by 2 floored is 1, so we're only going to look over one character. So we have last index becomes numstring.length minus 1, which is going to be 3 minus 2. So we're looking at the 0 and the second character, minus I, which is 0. So we're still looking at 0 and 2. Numstring at 0 is going to be this 1. Numstring at 0, 1, 2 is going to be the 1. Those match, so this doesn't fire. That for loop, the next time we go through the for loop, it actually ends at that point, and so we hit the return true. So that should be okay, but let me write out a couple of examples for that. So let's see, console log of is number palindrome 1, 2, 1, and then let's just put all the examples that was given. 10, let's do a bigger example just to make sure. And then 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. Actually, I kind of want to make this one so like it's just one character off just to see. And let's go ahead and run that. Node interview prep. All right, so true, this is a palindrome, so I expect true. This should be false. This should be false. This one should be false because the 4 doesn't match the 2, and this one should be true because those are all matching. So, moving out of candidate mode for now, that's how I would go through this problem if I was given this problem. You notice I'm very thorough. I'm explaining everything about this. When I got into the should I use floor, should I use round, I went the decision to use floor, but I explained that clearly. I explained to my interviewer why I went with floor versus round. Now, again, the interviewer has given this question 100 times. They know why you would go with floor versus go with round, and they know that both would probably work. They want to see if I have figured that out, if I can figure that out. So as soon as I said, "Oh, would round work?" they're thinking to themselves, "Round will work. Are you gonna figure this out?" And I went deeper into it, and my interviewer then puts a little check mark on their paper that says, "Yeah, they understood that it wouldn't make a difference, but they were going with this anyway for clarity." At this point, they might actually ask me, what if what are you sure that it would be more clear to go with floor? How would you make sure of that? And then I would say in that case, well, I would put a comment on it to say specifically I'm going with floor, not round. It shouldn't technically matter, but I feel like the floor just makes a little bit more sense from an initial algorithm perspective, so it's less confusing. You notice I copied everything they gave me, read off of it, used their examples, and then when I'm done, I ran the code myself. I ran the code myself using their examples, but also gave some of my own examples. The interviewer might give you other examples that they want you to run over. They might say, "Oh, can you try this?" And there's two things for that. One, they may not actually fully be sure if your algorithm works. I've run into that where I've said, "I'm not sure if this algorithm actually works. Let me give them a case to see if it does." Or they may know it doesn't work. And they may know specifically it doesn't work and be giving you a case that they know fails to find out if you need to debug. So let's say, for instance, that I had forgotten this -1 on here, right? And I went in and ran here. All of these suddenly come through false. This way, you're in control of that. You don't want to have told your interviewer, "I'm done, everything's good," and then them to give you a solution or an example that doesn't work with your situation. That's not nice at all. So in this case, I am in control. I'm saying, okay, I'm going to run these through. I run through them and I say, "Oh, that's false. I didn't expect that to be false. Let me go through and debug here and see what's going on." The interviewer is going to like that because it means you're taking control of the situation. And what that tells them is that you're going to test your code. Because if I get someone that throws together they just talk about, even if they talk about it well, 50-line solution to some problem, and they say, "Cool, done, we're good, let's move on," I don't like that. Because even if it works, even if I know it works, because I've asked this question 100 times, do they know it works? Do they? They don't. They may think it works, and I may know it works, but they don't know it works, and the fact that they don't know it works and they're not even trying to figure out if it works is a bad sign. So even if you're not given examples, you should try to come up with some examples to test your code. Even if it's complicated code, you should always be testing it. And I mean, this will help you if you're developing a complex algorithm as well. Those of you who've watched my LeetCode videos, you've seen how I've done that, where I've taken their examples and been console logging stuff and trying to figure out where it comes out. So this is an example of a relatively easy question. If you're a junior engineer, they might be expecting you to get this done and figure it out in maybe like half an hour. They may want you to do a couple other questions, but this is not a terrible one. The important thing to bear in mind is number, string, convert it into the format that's easiest for you to work with. So, any questions on anything I went over here, any of the slideshow I went through, anything like that? Okay. Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do now, if people are interested, is I'd like to invite someone to join me and actually do a mock interview. I will give you a question, take the role of the interviewer, and you're going to share your screen and write the code for the problem. Is anyone interested in doing that? I know it's a little scary. No, everyone's too shy. It's okay if no one wants to do it. I'll go over a couple more examples and we can just talk about it. I mean, kappa means you're interested, right? Kappa means this is something you want to do. Maybe one more. Okay. All right. We can do another example. Let's see. Let me look up another nice leak code easy problem, because the easy ones are, take less time. We'll do a medium one. Let's see. What we got here? Oh, okay. I guess it was figuring its stuff out. Square root of x, climbing stairs. You gave this answer, return x, and string join x to string. I would say if you gave them that answer, so let me actually put that in. That's kind of a cool answer. So the answer in chat was basically this, and so let me just put that in here. I would say as long as you're explaining what you're doing the entire time. So you're saying, okay, I want to make sure that I reverse the array. I need to convert my number into a string, first of all. Then my split is going to turn it into an array, and then I'm going to reverse it. What that does is that is going to get me a reverse string so I can compare it against the initial string. And I want to do that because if they're equal, then they're palindromes, right? Then I'm going to join it, again, turn it back into a string, and check it against x.toString. And if they are the same, then I know it's a palindrome, otherwise it's not. I would say as an interviewer, I would think that was quite clever. I would be comfortable with that answer as long as you explain how you got it. Because if you are just silent for 5 minutes and you paste that in, you say this will work, I'm going to be suspicious. I'm going to think, did you just look that up on Google? Do you understand what this is doing? Now, here's the thing. As an interviewer, I don't care if you're looking the code up on Google, as long as you understand what it's doing. If you look up a bunch of code on Google and you say, I know exactly what this code does, and here's the code, and this works, and this is why this works, I'm good. Let's see if this actually does work, though. I think it does. Oh, x is not defined. Well, that's no problem. Change that to number, which makes sense, right? All right. True, false, 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 true. Yeah, looks like it works. That's the other thing. Make sure you test it. Make sure you still write those test cases, and make sure you know. Actually, let's talk about O notation here. Oftentimes your recruiter will ask you, what is the runtime of this? Now, what they're not asking you how many milliseconds does this take to run. They're asking you for the big O notation. And so there's a couple kinds of notation. There's O, and then what's the other one? It's a Greek letter. It's like the Greek U letter. I forget exactly what it is called. But O notation is the big one because that's the runtime of the algorithm. Memory is cheap. At this point, we often don't optimize for memory unless you're running a SQL query, because a SQL query does sometimes run out of memory because SQL sucks sometimes, or your table's set up badly. We're optimizing for runtime because one of the biggest things we want to do is we want our customers to have their answers quickly. If a customer puts data into our system, we want that data to get in there quickly. If a customer asks for an answer out of our system, we want to give that answer quickly. Runtime is very important. So what they're going to ask is, what is the O of n? Okay. Now, what the hell does that mean? They're going to be like, what is the O of n? And you're going to be like, what are you talking about, the O of n? Is it like, oh, there's an n. I didn't put an n in here. No, that's not what they mean. Big O notation. There's two notations. There's little O notation, and it's like this, and there's big O notation. Little O notation is the most efficient your algorithm could possibly be. The idea there is assuming the absolute best inputs, everything, the stars align, everything's great. What is the absolute quickest your algorithm could run? Nobody cares about that, because that's oftentimes not what you're running into. We don't need to plan for best case scenario. If you have an algorithm that in the very best case, like let's say all the substrings of a string, right? All the substrings of a string are going to be O of n squared at worst case. I will be right back. Someone has locked themselves out of my apartment or house. I will be right back. Okay. Oops, let's go here. Where was I? Yeah, O of n notation. So we're not planning for the best case scenario. If I'm getting an algorithm that gets you all the substrings of a string, and your string is of length 1, well, that's a constant, basically. That's constant time. There's exactly one substring. I don't have to loop over anything. So I don't care about that. That is the best case scenario. I don't need to plan for that, because if I plan for the worst case scenario and the best case scenario happens, well, hey, I'm happy. If I plan for the worst case scenario and the worst case scenario happens, I'm also happy. If I only plan for the best case scenario and the worst case scenario happens, then everything's bad. So we don't plan for little o of n, for the little o notation, which is why you will almost never hear it in an interview. No one will ever say, give me the little o notation of this. Instead, you will hear about the big O notation. And, well, they won't actually, what is the O of n? They'll say something like, what is the runtime of this? Or what is the O notation of this? Or what can you tell me about the time complexity? Time complexity is actually a big one. So pay attention to this. Whenever they say time complexity, they want the O of n. So how do you calculate O of n? Well, you look at basically what you're doing and you say, okay, this num string into a number, this is constant, technically. Though actually, converting a number into a string might be O of n, because the thing you got to think of, n is the number of characters or elements in the thing you're looping over. If you have an array, n is the length of that array. If you have a string or something that can be turned into a string, n is the length of that string. So in this case, for this particular one, n is 3. And so turning a number into a string is, I believe, an O of n operation, because you have to loop over all the stuff. Generally, when you're converting something into another format, that is at least O of n to do. Because to convert a number to a string, we just have this code, right? It's a single statement. What is the computer doing under the hood to make this happen? It has to go through every single digit of the number and put it into a string. So it's doing that in a loop. So it's looping over every digit of the number, which makes it O of n. So this, we'd say, is O of n. Okay. Now we look at this for loop. For loops are a big place where we get a lot of issues with complexity. We say, okay, this goes from I equals 1 to the string length divided by 2. So this loop is going to be O of n over 2, right? Because at worst, it's going to loop over the length of the string divided in half. Last index num string, this is constant. This is O of 1. And when we say O of 1, it means this doesn't loop over anything. This is just getting the length, which is a constant time operation. And by constant time, it means it doesn't get any more complex the larger your data gets. So if we have a string of 3 characters, or we have a string of 3 million characters, getting the length takes the same amount of time. That's when we say this is a constant operation. This is a constant operation. We are doing a lookup on an array, but an array has a constant time lookup if we know the index we're looking at. That's the important bit. So this is also O of 1, because this, and you know this, does it take 1 millisecond? No, it doesn't take 1 millisecond. It probably takes less. We use 1 to indicate this takes some amount of time that is constant. We don't care really how much it is. It's a constant time operation. This, O of 1. All right, this, O of 1. I'm going to get to this one in a minute. So then you add them together. You say, okay, what's our full O? It's O of n plus n, n over 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. You can do this in your head, or you can do it like this. Totally fine. N, so this becomes O of, what is this? This is going to be 1.5 n plus 3. Now, here's the sneaky bit about O of n. We don't care about the constant bit. This doesn't tell us anything useful about the complexity of the algorithm, because these are all constants. So we just remove them. O of 1.5 n. We just drop that constant. Now here's the other part. We don't care about this either. Because if we have 4 we're looking at classes, right, of stuff. If we have a 3 million line array and you're looping over it 4 times, that's not a big deal. If you're looping over that array inside a loop that's already looping over that array, that's a big deal because that vastly increases the complexity. It's understood that the more data you put into a system, the longer it's going to take, right? The question we want is, what does that graph look like? Is that a linear graph? Is that O of n is a linear graph? Is that a quadratic graph, which is n squared? Is that a logarithmic graph? That's what we want to know. So we don't care about this 1.5 because all that does is that's just going to shift the graph up a little bit. So we just get rid of that and we say this becomes O of n. Now the way you can compute, you start to get able to compute this very fast eventually. O of n, O of n, O of n, O of n, all that stuff. The reason that becomes important is let's look at this particular one. Okay. Number toString. Oops, let me keep that up actually. Number.toString. And I'm actually going to put these on new lines just to kind of get at them here so that we can look at them. Okay, so number.toString, that is O of n, right? Because we're going over the whole number. That's basically the same thing as what I did here. Where the toString has to loop over the whole number to put into a string. Split has to loop over the whole string. So that is also O of n. Reverse, we're now dealing with an array. Okay, reverse, technically, I think the most efficient way to write reverse is similar to how we did this palindrome here. You just swap pairs as you go down the string. And so that could be O of n over 2. Join does the same thing as it loops over the whole array, which means it's O of n. This then also is O of n. So what does that become? That becomes O of n plus n over 2 plus n, which becomes O of 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5n, which becomes O of n. Same class, same classification. Now I would say this algorithm might be a little more efficient because it has a bunch of constant operations and only loops over n 1.5, whereas this one goes over 4.5. Most companies you are working at will not care about the difference at all. If you are applying to work for Google and you're interviewing at Google, they might care because they are actually working with billions of pieces of data. And so the difference between 4.5n and 1.5n actually makes a difference to them because it will cut the runtime in half, which they care about. Most companies, they're just saying, okay, O of n, pretty good. That's not O of n squared or O of n cubed. They're not too worried about the difference between these two algorithms. But that is kind of how you do O of n. If someone asks you for the time complexity, this is how you go about it. It can be a little complicated at first. The thing to remember, your own loops have an O of n, but built-in functions also do as well. So if you're doing something like this, you can't just say, oh, this runs in constant time. If I have someone give me this code and they tell me it runs in constant time, I'm going to laugh at them because there's no way this runs in constant time. These functions you have to think, what is this function doing? And so split, right? Split has to loop over every character in the array, in the string to split it out, to know if it should be split. And I'm pretty sure that can be done in O of n. So reverse, same thing. It has to at least go over half the array to be able to flip it. So you need to pay attention to that stuff. You can't just get this for free. A lot of times, like if you wrote it out like this with the comments like this, as a junior engineer, an interviewer is going to be impressed by that. They're going to think, oh, that's pretty cool. You actually do understand what you're doing. Even if you get a couple of them wrong, usually okay. But that's just, keep in mind what it's doing. For loops are almost never going to be constant time if they have anything to do with your input data at all. Even if and here's where it gets complicated. In bigger projects, you're going to need to know how, if you've manipulated your data in certain ways, how that manipulated data stacks up. Like when I did the palindrome video, if you generate a list of all the substrings in your entire string, that list is now O of n squared. Any operation you do on that list is O of n squared because that's how many elements it has, and you have to remember that. So yeah, in more complicated ones, you might have an M as well if you have multiple pieces of data, but that's less complex. Yeah, I've also had people argue with me about this stuff, which I think is kind of hilarious. Anyway, any questions on big O notation? All right. Well, we'll do a couple more examples, and we'll try to do some more big O notation. It's the sort of thing that you just have to practice, and eventually it starts to stick with you. Okay, let's try binary tree in order traversal. The other thing is certain data structures have certain known efficiencies on how to do stuff. So a hash map, looking up data in a hash map, is going to be and inserting data into a hash map is always going to be constant time. But you have to put data into the hash map to look at it that way, which is, why it can be useful sometimes. Ooh, Pascal's triangle. I feel like I've done this one before. Pascal's triangle. Let's take a look at this. Given an integer num rows, return the first. Oh yeah, I have done this. You can see my my answer here actually. Return the first num rows of Pascal's triangle. Each number is the sum of the two numbers directly above it. So you can see 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, 4, 6, 1. This one is a pattern. Okay, so let's say that I was to go in here. You know what? I bet I've done this one for the class, actually. That's why it's filled in here. I think I have. Oh, yep. It already exists. Pascal's triangle. Okay, well, fine. We're just going to do Pascal's triangle, too, because that wasn't on an interview setting. That's actually really funny. That's why it was familiar to me. All right. Nope, I don't want that. If I paste this in. Okay. So let's take a look at what we have here. Given an integer num rows, return the first num rows of Pascal's triangle. In Pascal's triangle, these numbers are the sum of the two numbers directly above it as shown. So I start off with num rows of 5. And what they want, I'm going to put this in order here because it'll be easier for me to kind of see what's going on. This is what we want here. So let's take a look at what we have. The first character is always 1. The second character is just the count. But then the last character is also just the count. So the last character goes up by 1. Let's do another row of this because the thing I want to find here is I want to find the pattern. What is the pattern of this triangle? Because if I can find the pattern, that gives me a very nice way of doing algorithm. So that's going to be 5. This one, let's shift this over by 1 just so we can say, okay. The next number is going to be 2. It's going to be 10. And I think 10 again, and 5 and 1. All right, so let me see here. We start off with 1. That feeds down to that. So the first and last is always 1. So that definitely, that's a pattern I can use. The next two are always going to be whatever row we're on. All right, and I know this is actually of 6. And then these ones in here. So let's see, this is going to be 3, 4, 5. This is 6 to 10. So what we could do is we could actually do like they have the sum of the two numbers directly above it. We could do a sliding like the first number is 1, the next, and then we just loop over the previous row, add each two numbers together, and put that in, and then just slap 1 on the end. I think that might work because basically what we do there, let's say for this last row, we'd start off with 1, then the previous row, we'd take these two numbers in a sliding scale of 2 for 5, we'd slide that scale forward, that's 10, we'd slide it forward again, that's 10, we'd slide it forward again, that's 5, and then we add a 1 on the end. There might be a better way of doing that. There might be a more efficient way of doing that, but that's the simplest for now, so I'm going to code that up and see what we get. Function Pascal triangle rows. Okay, so what I'm going to do is And here's the question I'd ask the interviewer. Now I'd say, can rows be 0? Can the rows be 0? If they say no, then I know I don't have to deal with that. If they say yes, then I'd say, okay, I got to handle that. But that's the thing. Ask. Don't assume. Never assume anything about the problem. If I'm going through here and I say, okay, this is here, I might even ask the interview, does that look correct to you? Does this look like this would be the correct next row? And they're usually happy to answer that because they know that they need to give you the tools to succeed at what you're doing. It's not really a good way to put that, is there? They need to give you the tools to succeed. So I would say, okay, num rows, can num rows be 0? And if they said yes, I would say, okay, well, let me handle the 0 case. If rows is 0, then we have no triangle. So we're just going to return an empty array. Now you see, very simple thing, right? I dealt with it in a couple seconds. That's an edge case. If you're doing algorithms, your interviewer is going to be checking to make sure that you've handled your edge cases. And in fact, they may be giving you, if you don't handle your edge cases, they will give you examples that trigger those edge cases. Because remember, they've asked this question 100 times. They know all the edge cases on it. That's an edge case. But what that has done is now the interviewer is saying, oh, okay, I don't have to think about that. And they've probably written down handled 0 rows edge case in their notes. I asked. If I just put that code in there and said if rows equals 0, blah, 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 they might still put that down, handled 0 edge case, but they may never have even been intending that. They may have said, no, the rows, and actually if we look here, 0 is not a valid row, right? This constraint tells me that number of rows cannot be less than 1. This is a mathematical formula of handling this. So basically, this is that constraint. And so if I'd asked them that, can rows be 0? They might say, no, rows cannot be 0. And so I wouldn't even need to put this edge case in here. Not the hugest deal in most cases, but sometimes it can save you time because when you're doing an algorithm, you want to be able to almost collect the assumptions you can make about your data. Because the more assumptions you have, the less code you actually have to write to clarify those assumptions. So right now, if I have this code, I can assume for the rest of the code, rest of the program, that rows is not 0 because I've already, if it was 0, we wouldn't have gotten there. That's an assumption. And that makes the rest of my code easier because otherwise, if I didn't have that assumption, I have to check it somewhere else. So any assumption that you can make about the data that's coming in is good. The other thing it says in here is that there can't be more than 30 rows. That's nice. I don't really care about that for the algorithm I'm particularly going to do. It's not a really big deal, but that could be useful if you know that you're not going to have a very large number of rows in here. Maybe you optimize your algorithm differently. All right. Okay, so Pascal's triangle, let's say, so I start out, okay, result rows equals blank. I could have called it num rows as well. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off, I'm going to loop over my result rows, or my rows, sorry. Equals 0, I less than rows, I plus plus. And then for each one of those, new row equals, we're going to start off with 1, because we know that the first element is always 1. Okay? Then, I'm going to return new row, and I'm going to actually console log, because I just want to make sure. Pascal's triangle, and let's do 5 here. All right, we'll save that, and then node. This is totally fine to do. If you're running your code, whoops, 2, because I already had it. If you're running your code multiple times and just checking it, your interviewer is not going to be pissed off about that as long as you're not taking a long time. If you're taking a really long time, being like, oh, you know, blah, 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 and actually I have made a bug in here. So I run this. New row is not defined. Oh, right, because I need to result rows, and I need to actually push new row. Now, you notice, your interviewer noticed that. As soon as you type that, they notice that you've made that mistake, very likely. And so they're wondering if you're going to catch it. And so running this code immediately helps you catch that error. Okay, so now I've got 5 rows, which is fine because I'm expecting 5 rows. They all start with 1. Perfect. So now what I want to do, here's another edge case. If I equals 0, well, actually, if I is greater than 0, is the only time that we're actually going to do stuff with our rows. Because if I is 0, there's no previous row to go off of. There's no previous row in the system for us to look at. However, if I is 0, then I can say, okay, previous row equals result rows I minus 1. Now what I want to do is I'm going to console log that because I'm not completely sure that that I minus 1 matches up correctly with this for loop. I think it should, but I want to double check. So let's see. Okay, so yeah, I get a good row every time for those 4 rows. That should be fine. So now let's see. So now I have my row with that 1. So I have that first element. And so now I want to start building my sliding scale into it. Okay, so I want to slide across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop over the previous row. For 0, j is less than previous row dot length minus 1. And the reason I'm doing that minus 1 is because I'm doing a sliding scale of 2. So in this case, I want to go 1, 2, 1, 2. I don't want to hit that 1 because there wouldn't be anything else to go to. I'm making an assumption. If I make this assumption here, then I don't have to be checking boundaries inside that for loop. I don't have to check to see if I'm close to the edge and if there is a second one, right? So actually, let me put that in if I don't have that in there. Let me show you what happens. So I'm going to say new value equals previous row j plus previous row j plus 1. Okay, and then we're going to say new row dot push new value. Okay, pretty good. So now we're getting our value. We're taking that previous row and the one next. We're adding them together. We're pushing them in. So those are coming down like a triangle should. I run that and I get not a number. Now that's kind of funny, right? I wasn't even expecting anything to show up there because that previous value was 1. This should never have even looped. There's no 2. There's no 2 numbers to go onto that first row. So that's the reason for that -1. Because that j plus 1, I need to have something there. Now, oh, it didn't do anything at all. Now we've got a bug. So let's take a look. Okay, we've got that j, we've got that j. So let's take a look at it. We have our previous row. And I want j0, j0 at length. Oh, you know why it doesn't have anything is because every single one of these is just a single one. And so there'd be nothing in there. So at the end of this whole loop, new row dot has to have pushed into it another I. But only if I is greater than 0. Because that is going to be, you know what, actually. Sorry, 1. I'll leave it for now. And what that's going to do is for that second row, we're going to have that 2 1s, and that's what eventually triggers that 2. So if we don't have those 2 1s, we don't get the 2, which means we don't get anything else. Now if I run that, I have 1 1 1 1 2 1 1 3 3 1 1 4 6 4 1. Great. I want to change this a little bit though. I actually want to take this and pull this out here and make this an empty array. Reason I want to do that, it is simpler to have an algorithm that has less code in branching code paths. So now, this is the same. We always start out, oh, you know what? I can't do that. Maybe I can. Let's see. Because if I do that, no, it only does that 1 1 1 again. Okay, so I have to have the 2. So that doesn't work. See, and that would be totally okay as a candidate, as someone who's interviewing. It would be totally okay for me to say, okay, let me see. I have an idea. I want to see if I can make this better. Put it in there. It doesn't work. Okay, undo it. Right? It's not going to work. But always make sure you run your code to verify that. So now we've got that. Let's do a couple of others. Let's try of 1 and maybe 2 to see how those work. That looks good. Let's try a big one, 12 maybe. That's kind of long. That looks okay so far though. Like I'm not gonna actually check them all. This should be fine. So that's the algorithm here. A little more complicated, right? But it was all built off of simple ideas. The most important thing is finding out your data and how to look at it. So we have this number. How do we generate this data from it? And they actually give you a hint. The sum of the numbers directly above it. Well, we're not doing the above, right? Except I kind of shifted this data so it looks like it's above. The computer doesn't look at it as above. The computer looks at it as a nested array. But we are basically putting a context on this on our own and saying, oh, it's above. It's above because it's those two things and how they move in, and seeing how to make that work. So that's really looking, what this is this is a way to look at your output data in a way that is different from how it's actually being output. Technically, that output data is fine. It's like this. The computer doesn't know. We know, though, because we have that context that we put on it. And so that's what you really need to do in a question like this. You need to be able to say, okay, what does that actually mean? What does the output data actually mean, and how do I get it into that state? Any questions on this algorithm so far? No questions? All right. So, what is the time complexity of this algorithm? This gets really complicated because we don't have n. There's no n. There's no string or data that we really pass in that relates to this. So let's look at here. These are all constant. This is constant. We're going to ignore that. This loop, this is technically O of n, right? So this loops over. If n is rows, this is technically O of n. So now, this is constant. This is constant. This is constant. What about this loop? Previous row dot length. How does previous row dot length relate to O of n in the worst case? So let's see. For n, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Rows equals 5. This is n, right? So this is O of n. Because our previous row, technically our previous row is never going to be higher than n minus 1. Because for the last row we do here, ignoring this one, because that's not actually part of the output, it's going to be 4. It's going to be 5 minus 1. So this is where it gets tricky because you have to know what your previous row data was. So this is going to be O of n. Oh, wow. Not where I wanted that. N minus 1. This, constant. Constant, 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 constant. So you see, I'm not bothering to write them out here. These are the only two that we actually care about. The O of n, the O of n plus 1. That becomes, okay, O of n times n plus 1. Because multiplication is when it's nested in there. That 1 disappears. This becomes n times n, which is n squared. So this is an O of n squared algorithm. So if you gave this 1,000,000, it would run 1,000,000 squared times that inner loop. Not the best, but you know this also, this inner loop runs a bunch of times. We don't care. We just care about the worst case scenario. N minus 1, in fact, I would just call this O of n as well. If they call you, is that exactly O of n? You could say, well, it's technically O of n minus 1 because the previous row is smaller, and we're going to the minus 1 here, so it's minus 2. But minus 2 is actually a constant, so it doesn't matter, so it just goes to O of n. N. Now, these aren't running over the same data set, but kind of good to know that your previous row is generated based on rows here. And so rows is a number, previous row is an array, but they still kind of represent and are attached to the same n. So it's a little complicated to figure that out. If you flub the O of n, don't worry about it too much. Just give them a good, like, this is why I think it is this way. And that's often going to be, pretty good. Any questions on that? And if anyone stops me able to hear me clearly, just let me know. Because sometimes my focus rate just dies, or I sound like a robot for like 5 minutes. And, I can't hear myself what's coming out. So, y'all gotta let me know. All right, well, there's no questions. What happens if you write the code and you don't know the timer and space complexity? If you don't know, give it your best guess, because it is the sort of thing. Generally, anytime you're looping, that's usually O of n. I mean, if you're throwing out a wild guess, anytime you do a loop, make it O of n, and then add and multiply as appropriate. Space complexity, you're usually not going to be asked space complexity. Um, that's a very uncommon thing. People don't care about space complexity in most cases because space is cheap. Space RAM is really cheap. If your algorithm needs to run on higher RAM and we need to throw a billion things through it and its space complexity is O of n cubed or space of n cubed, I forget exactly what it's probably, yeah, that's the U is the space complexity, that Greek U. Then we just get more RAM. That's something we have control over. What we don't have control over is the customer getting pissed off because something took too long. So it's for space complexity, we go to the space complexity of this. Do interviewers put an X next to your name if you did Google, as long as you find a way to solve the problem and understand it's good for me, versus, oh, this candidate has to write the code themselves? Ask. Always ask. That is definitely the big thing. If you want to Google something, you ask the recruiter or the interviewer, can I look this up? Can I Google answers? Most of them, if someone asks me that, I'm like, yeah. What I would ask them is I would say, well, please do it in the view of the video so I can see what you're Googling, because that has an important distinction. But as engineers, most of the time we are Googling. I have had interviewers that have told me I cannot Google. That's more rare than not, but that is the sort of thing you should ask because it never hurts to ask. They're not gonna give you points off for asking if you can Google something, unless they are a really terrible interviewer. Like that's a really bad interviewer. If they're like, person asked if they can Google, I'm not hiring them. Like, what? No, that's terrible. So yeah, just ask. And you could ask, like, I've had people ask me, can I use Bootstrap for this? I was like, sure. Some guy said, hey, I've got a code snippet that already works for part of this. Can I pull that in? And I said, I will let you do that as long as you can explain to me in detail what it does. Fine with me. I've used code snippets in interviews too. Like, I had a take-home project. This is another thing you might get that I guess we didn't cover. You may get something that's technically like a take-home project, but you're not actually going home. They'll just give you 3 hours in their office to solve some project. I've had that happen a couple times. It's a little bit more rare, but I've had it happen. And a lot of times they just want to see how you code given a much longer period of time. And so in that case, I actually pulled in a snippet of code because I had my laptop that I used for this is before fetch became popular. So I used it for like fetch requests, the equivalent of fetch requests, and was able to save myself about half an hour with that. Not a big deal. It's code I wrote. Even if you Google code for something like that, if you understand it well enough to put it in your program, that's usually okay because you know what? That's what you're going to be doing anyway when you're usually working. What I would say is if the interviewer says, yeah, you can Google this, and you immediately go and look up leak code how to solve Pascal's triangle and you look at a solution, you copy that solution, you're going to fail that. Don't do that. But if you're looking up, oh, okay, let me see, how do I use this various array function? Or what is the time complexity of push? That's fine. We're all human. We don't have to keep everything in our heads. And that's what Google is for. And so that's why if you just ask, a lot of times they'll say yeah. I will usually say yes. I'll say, yeah, I don't care. Go ahead. Do whatever. So, is there anyone who wants to do a mock problem? You don't have to. Don't feel any pressure about it, but I'm not so worried about like if you're going to get the problem or not. but this is good practice. Especially knowing how to handle an interview when you have no idea what the hell you're doing is often very valuable as well. Well, if you're at work, that makes sense. Yeah, you probably shouldn't be in the middle of an interview while you're at work. That they tend to not like that sort of stuff. How about you, Red Braze June, which I assume is Jerry? How's it going? You want to do one? Well, you know, just the way that you're talking, that's how I was able to guess. All right, so go ahead and hop into. I'm gonna make a voice channel in Discord, and I'm actually going to. No, I'll just mute stuff. So go ahead and join the voice channel I just created in Discord, and then let me know when you're in. You might want to mute the stream as well because I won't be muted in there. Hello, Jerry. How's it going?
Good morning, Robert.
Good morning. Can you turn your volume up just a little bit?
Can I turn my volume up just a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, does this work?
That's much better. Excellent. All right, cool. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a prompt and you're going to share your screen. All right, so go ahead and share that. And just open up a code editor or whatever your favorite code editor is, as if I couldn't guess what that is.
Oh my god, it's going to be VS Code.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Okay, share my screen, open VS Code.
Yeah. And oftentimes in interviews, there is a little bit of a, like, oh, they have to figure out how to get their stuff shared and all that stuff. And that's totally fine at the beginning to get that all set up. All right. Watch stream. All right, so let's see if I can pop this out. All right. And can I make this bigger? That's not... Discord is not amazing for this because I can't make this any bigger. I'd like to. Can I make this full screen? There we go. That's that's going to be good enough. Okay. So can you on your VS Code zoom in a little bit so I can see what you're doing?
VS Code zoom in. Oh. Yeah. I don't think I can zoom in when I have nothing written, right? Oh god, it's in the settings somewhere, isn't it?
If you hold down Control and plus, I think it's the zoom.
Oh, Control plus.
Maybe it's not. Let's see.
Oh, it is.
Okay. Let me find that again. All right, cool. So now at this point, I'm going to take on the role of the interviewer, and you're going to take on the role of the interviewee. All right? Let me know when you're ready.
I am ready.
All right. So Jerry, thanks for taking the time to interview with us today. Do you need anything before we get started? Bathroom break, water, anything?
No, I am perfect.
Cool, awesome. So we're going to be doing roughly about an hour. Well, we've got an hour, so we'll probably go about 50 minutes of this. Just for the student, it probably will not be exactly 50 minutes, but that's usually what they say. Then we'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for you to ask any questions you have of me. All right, does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so your first question is going to be, given a string, okay, write me an algorithm that returns or generates all the substrings of that string.
An algorithm that writes substrings?
Generates all the substrings, yeah.
All the substrings of that string. Oh,
of that
God.
string?
I think I have Copilot on.
That's okay.
I've actually never used this.
That's okay.
Okay.
As long as you understand what you're doing, we can go with that.
Wow, how convenient. I can just press tab.
Yeah.
Oh god. Okay, is there a
Maybe
way to do
maybe you
this?
should turn that part off.
I don't know how to. I've actually never used this before.
Yeah, probably if you look up
Lost what?
Copilot. Oops. There you go. And just yeah, so you just disable that. You had it a second ago.
Where is it?
Well, you gotta. It's PIL.
Oh.
There you go.
Does it work?
You might need to. Well, let's see.
Oh, it says reload required.
All right. Yeah. Go ahead and reload. Then that's fine. They probably want you to
Okay.
reload.
Good.
Okay. Cool. That looks like that's off. Maybe it is.
Given a string, write an algorithm that generates all the substrings.
That'd be a thing. I would say make sure you disable Copilot before you go in the
Yeah.
interview because they may consider that to be cheating. Try it. Just go ahead and close VS Code and reopen it because that's what they mean by reload. All right. Cool.
Okay, it worked. Okay. Now, if I ask a question of like, what do you mean by all the substrings of that string?
Yeah, that's a legitimate question. So basically, a substring would be. I'll give you an example here. Okay. So
Okay.
if the string that you're passed in is A B C D, for instance,
Uh-huh.
your substring should be AB, ABC, ABCD, B. Yeah, I'll give them to you again. Just so you can write them down. AB, ABC, ABCD, B, BC, BCD, C, CD,
Oh.
and D.
And then D.
Notice
Oh.
that you wouldn't have anything like DA or
Mhm.
AC because those are combinations, not substrings. This is basically if you take 2 points on anywhere on that string, any of the characters between those 2 points would be a substring. And so I want you to generate every single one of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me know if you have
Uh,
questions.
Oh god. String again. Why do I think this should have been like one of those very early on LeetCode problems that I should have already encountered before, but I haven't for some reason?
Yeah, generating substrings is one of those little tiny pieces that definitely shows up in a lot of cases.
That's not a value.
All right, so who in the chat knows the first mistake that Jerry's making?
Okay, there's 4 people here. One of them is me.
All right, the big mistake that Jerry's making right now is he's not narrating his thought process. Yep,
Oh.
exactly. He's not explaining. Everything you're doing should be crystal clear to the interviewer why you're doing it, even if it's completely wrong. They should understand why you're
Okay.
doing it.
So my thought process is first I'm going to need. Oh, I'm so bad at this.
It's okay. You get
I'm
better.
going to need all the. I'm going to need all the letters and candidates. For example, if I'm going to be doing A, B, C, D, I'm first going to need all of these letters, and I'm going to put them in a string. And that is currently what I did here. Hopefully. Need fix. Okay, I'm just gonna keep going. And then what I'm probably going to do next is put these strings together.
Okay.
I have anxiety now.
It's all right. Good to get it out now rather than when you're actually in a real interview.
That is true. I'm definitely going to loop through this string for sure. So I'm gonna write a for loop. Let I is less than 0. Okay, I don't want to hear anything about that one. I just made a mistake.
The fact that you recovered
I
it and understood it was a mistake is good.
is less than the string length dot length. Wait. Okay. This is okay. And then we do I plus plus. That's not a plus plus. That's not plus plus. And then we put this here. So now that we're going to loop through that thing, the array. Var alphabet. I feel like it should be an object. Probably not. Okay. And now, since I'm going to be adding these words together into a string, but I will not be, it has to be by one, and cannot be all together at the same time. I'm probably going to be using another index j for this because I'm going to be going through the same this thing object
Okay.
or array at the same time with two different indexes.
So I want to talk about the
So
alphabet for a minute there. Are you
mhm.
sure that those 4 letters are the only letters you're ever going to have to deal with?
Oh, okay, that is true. Because in this scenario, given this example, those are the only 4 letters. But
Right.
if you put this string in any 5 letters, the code's going to break.
Right. Exactly.
Therefore, because I'll be using two indexes, I should probably change this into now, this is where I just put A through Z in here because that's going to take a lot of time. And is there an easier way to like write all alphabets instead of typing them out all by one?
Well, the thing I would say, not necessarily, well, maybe it's interview at this point. Do you need to type out the whole alphabet? What are you going to use that alphabet for?
Uh, no, I've only need A, B, C, D in this case. But if I put this code into like, if there's an E, the code's probably going to break.
Right. So is there a
Right.
way to get the list of characters that are in the string that you're given?
Is there a way to get the list of characters in the string that I am given? I'm looking up on my ceiling right now, I swear.
Okay, I believe you.
Uh,
So the question I have then is like, why do you need the alphabet?
oh, I don't really need the alphabet. That's right. Or it doesn't have to be A, B, C, D. Like this could be apple, oranges, and peaches. Then apple or apple, and then apple and oranges, and apple, oranges, peaches, and then apple, oranges, peaches, strawberries, and they just go to oranges and then oranges and peaches. Oh, okay. So this should probably be an empty object,
Okay.
and then semicolon because that's very important. Now with an empty object, oh, don't I
What
have
would
to put
happen if you
stuff in
didn't
here?
put the semicolon?
Probably nothing in this case.
I'm not saying you need to get rid of it. I'm just curious.
Well, let's find out. I
All
have
right.
no idea. Oh, wait, I have to call the function at the end, right? How do I even run this again? I feel like those are definitely words that definitely should not say during an interview. Oh God, how do I run this code again? I just been writing a leak code. It just does it
Yeah.
for. There's a red button.
Yeah,
I'm
and
assuming.
that's why it's important not to rely completely on leak code because you are going to be in the situations where you have to run this yourself. How do you call a function in JavaScript?
Like this.
Yeah, there you go.
And then I do what? I don't do npm start.
Now at this point you could just use node because you're not using any.
Oh, no start.
Well,
Oh,
node and then the name of the file you want to run.
oh. Ha.
All right.
String is not defined. Oh. Oh. So what is the string here? Because
Well, the string there is going to be the input value, right? I
right.
think in your call down there you didn't provide an input value. You just
Oh, you
provided
just
string,
did
which
this.
hasn't been done yet.
Hmm.
Look at the line number on where your error is coming from.
Look at the line number. 17. Oh. If I just take this out, does this work? No. Cannot read properties of undefined reading line. Well, yeah, it's not going to read the length because there's no string.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I think I would need to create a random string in here. For example, str equals or whatever you decide to put in here.
Is that a string on line 17?
Oh,
Do you not do you remember how to do a string, Jerry?
no, I don't.
You have to put it in quotes.
Oh, it's in quotes. Oh, I remember now.
It's
A.
also not in parentheses.
Are you sure?
Yeah, just the quotes, and it's not with commas either. You put
There's no commas
the
here
whole
either?
thing inside the quotes. There you
Like
go.
this. Oh, this looks way familiar. Okay. Okay, it didn't give me an error this time
Okay.
because I've only looped through the string and I'm not doing anything to them.
Mm.
Therefore, it's not gonna do anything, but there's no error. Okay, wonderful. So we can probably keep this code at the bottom. That's the demonstration code that we will be using. And back to so I don't really need this here, huh? Do I still need that there?
It depends on what you're intending to put in there.
I guess. Okay, I think we're still gonna need it because how in my phrase I'm going to do the add the strings together and then put it this in this al- alphabet object that we're going to need. And
Okay.
it didn't give me an error
Yeah.
if I took out the semicolon. Now this is gonna give me another error. No, it didn't. Okay. I like to leave that there because habits. Okay, so now we will be looping through. Wait a minute. If I told the interviewer I have a flashcard of something, can I pull it out? Even though,
Well, is it on the computer?
oh no, it's not.
Yeah, it's written down.
Well,
I mean, the thing I would
yeah.
say is if you have it just kind of by your computer and
Oh, turn on your camera, show it.
yeah, just don't,
Oh,
don't if you understand all that code that's on your flashcard and you're just using it for
mm-hmm,
reference, that's probably
mm-hmm.
fine. Um, you're probably okay with
Okay,
that.
okay. Okay, so now that we loop through the string once for the I index, we're going to need to loop through the string a second time, but instead of I being 0 or I equals to 0, this number is going to be j. So I'm going to copy this because it's easier. This is going to be, no, this is still this is still let j equals b. We're not starting at 0 anymore. This j will always go after the index of the string, one after where the index is. So it will be I plus 1. And instead of this as being I, this is going to be j. Oh. Uh, uh, Okay, there you go. And then instead of I plus plus, this will be j plus plus. So what this code is doing is the top code is looping through the through the string with every single indexes, and then this code, this j code, will be looping through the string with the index after the j. And uh, with this in mind, now that I am able to achieve AB, I think.
Okay.
But I haven't written the code that actually achieves that yet. I'm just looping through the string. But now since I loop through the string, I need to actually store this inside this object. And oh, I did this code yesterday. Oh, no, oh, I'm not picking that up. Programs to also. Wait, 1 second.
All right, Jerry's got a very urgent phone call he has to take. Um, so yeah, this is it's taking shape. The solution here. Um, yeah, and you can see he tried a couple methods, and as the interviewer, I gave him a couple pointers to push him back on track, and just gave a couple hints, and that is something the interviewer will sometimes do, especially for junior candidates. They'll give you some hints because they kind of know the common sidetracks you could run into. Um, Basics is important. So remembering how to create a string, for instance, is going to be very important for these interviews because those are the things they expect you kind of have down. Are you back, Jerry?
Yep, I am back.
All
It's
right.
just my dad calling me to get lunch.
Okay.
He's totally not giving me the solution to this code. Wink. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
Just a
generally
steal,
in most
guys.
interviews, I would say it's probably a bad thing to answer your phone.
Yeah.
In this case, totally fine. But
Mm-hmm. I did this yesterday with the set add and push, and it's the same logic where you have something and you're trying to push it into an object.
uh-huh.
So here I can, whatever this outcome is, I can push this into. I can push the whatever outcome. Well, I need to first put the outcome together. So now we're looking through the string. We need to add the first. We need to add in j together. Hmm. And that will be the result or the outcome. So I can do result is result is. So whatever the result is, I will put this in alphabet. So result dot push result dot push, and then the strings that I went over. How do I add I and j at the current time interval together?
Are you just trying to add the indexes together or the characters that they represent?
The characters they represent together.
Okay.
With that, I'm probably going to be doing like I comma j. Like that's probably what I'm going to be doing. But I just don't know like a better way or a way in general just to like
Okay.
add the
So
strings together.
can you think of maybe a specific method in the JavaScript standard library that would let you do that?
Uh, we have split to split them. Oh god. Oh, I did this. I did this. We have split to split them apart. And then we have join.
Well, that is
Does
one
it
way.
start with the letter S?
It does start with the letter S.
Okay.
So
Is it
this
slice?
would be a good time to actually pull up Google
Oh,
and look up how to get characters in a string between two indexes.
okay. Okay. How to add? I'm gonna pull Google right over here. Dun, dun, dun. Haha, that was a power jump.
Did you just search for Google on Google?
Yes, I did. How to add two strings together in JavaScript. Okay, W3 Schools, my savior. Concat. Uh, Given 3 ways to concentrate strings in JavaScript. Am I asking the right question? How to add two strings together from the same. How to add two.
So you're trying to figure out how to concatenate strings. Why? What are you going to
No.
concatenate together?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what concatenate means. That's definitely not what I want.
Okay. Well, concatenate means to
Right.
put together.
Oh. Uh,
See, and this is also an important part of the interview. Is now I'm checking to see
if
does
I
he
know how to Google.
understand the question he's trying to ask? Does he understand why he asked that question? And does he understand how
Mm,
to work with the solutions that are being given?
mm,
So, see, sometimes your interviewer wants you to be able to Google because it tells them some valuable information about how you work. And in this case, Jerry, you are asking the wrong question.
oh. Okay. How am I asking the wrong question? I need to ask the right question. So the
So
right question in this case would be
you're looking at how to get a string between two indexes because you have I and J and you want to get the substring.
right.
So how would you ask that?
Oh. How okay. How to add how to create a substring from a string in oh god. JavaScript substring. Oh, there's a method called substring.
So
I
do
feel
you,
like I'm still asking the wrong question.
well, do you think that this method would accomplish what you're trying to do?
No.
Okay. What are you trying to accomplish right now?
I'm trying to accomplish adding the first index that I go through with the second index that I'm going to go through
Okay.
in the string.
So you're trying to get the particular character at that index?
Right. I'm trying to get the particular character at that index and add it together.
Okay. So how do you do that? And more importantly, how would you search for that?
How do you search for that? Oh.
So what you just told me, what you're trying to do, just put that into Google and see what comes up.
Is that like the correct thought of mine of what I'm trying to do?
It could lead to something that would work. I think there are easier ways to accomplish it, but what you're doing
Oh.
could work. See, that's not what you told me you were doing, though.
Right, now I just forgot what I just told you what I was gonna do.
Okay, well, what? But go ahead and remember it again. What was it that that you told me you were gonna do?
What I told you I was gonna do is I need to add. I just forgot what I told you. Okay.
That's keeping track of your own train of thought is pretty important too. The thing that can help with that is as soon as you figure out what you're going to do, write it down in the comment
Okay.
because that'll help you remember it later on. Leave little breadcrumbs for yourself so you remember what you're doing.
I need to add ing from the same.
So what do the I and J represent at this point?
Uh, the indexes in
Right,
this string.
right. So do you want to add
And
the indexes together or do you want to add their characters together?
index characters. Index ng's character. Okay. I don't know where I just. Oh, there it is. Four ways to combine strings in JavaScript. This looks promising. There's no ways to join. And this is where Robert's just like, ah, it was the join, Jerry. God. You know, I feel like the join might work. If this is the join, I'll be very upset. Okay.
So here's a hint. You can access a character in a string with an index the same way you would access an element in an array in JavaScript.
Oh, like this, right?
Is that
If
how you
if the
access an
index.
element in an array?
Definitely not. Well, how to access an element in an array? You will select the element first, and then you will select the array. Choose the array by. Mm, so right now I'm trying to select an element in the array.
Right. So you remember how we do that? We use square brackets for it.
Oh, I never knew you could do that. Just highlight something, press the square bracket, or square brackets everything. I'm learning. Uh, so in this case, I would. I'm not. Can I do this? Can I do string dot join, and then we do I comma j. I feel like that needs to be in here. So they're all together. Color change. That's probably something good. Um, string not join I comma j. This is not going to work because there's nothing in front of it. That's not probably how I do this. I feel like this could work because I'm joining the strings together with the index of the first character and the index of the second character. You know what? I'm gonna give it a shot.
Okay.
Hopefully, this works. And I want the outcome of this to be pushed in the alphabet. So, result. Oh my god. All right, 1 second. Jennifer, can you call Dad? God. Oh my god, what the hell is that? Oh. That's probably exactly not what I need. Result. I want to push this result. Oh my god. Result, I'll push this. And then I need to. My dad literally called me for us to tell us to close the door when we leave. I can't. This is what I have to deal with, Robert. This happens during class time.
I believe it.
And then I'm gonna test this out. Okay. The result is not defined. It's definitely because there's an error to it. And
What is the error to that, though?
what is the error to that?
There's a couple errors to that. The big error, though, is that result doesn't exist.
Oh. The result doesn't exist yet. Oh. Is it this? String. No, wait. String.join is not a function. What? Oh, here. String.join is not a function.
All right, I think I'm going to stop you there, Jerry. You started off really strong. And,
Okay.
That is. You did well with the loops. The loops make good sense. What I would, if I was actually giving you an interview on this, in my notes would be candidate does not have a solid grasp of their chosen language. And so things that I would definitely recommend you practice: how to create strings, for one, because that's kind of important. But the standard library of JavaScript, so that is what methods are available on strings, what methods are available on arrays, how do you index arrays, how do you index strings, the basic functionality of strings and arrays and objects is the sort of thing that you really need to have down well, because those are the things that interviewers assume that you have when they're asking you these questions. So in your particular case, you actually ran over the correct function when you're Googling. It is substring.
Oh.
And so in this case, you would actually want to have result.push with parenthesis because it's a function call. String.substring ij. Instead of alphabet, you would have result, and that would get you fairly close to the correct solution. The reason it keeps giving you XPath result is because result doesn't exist. You haven't defined it. So you need to define it before your loops happen.
Oh, okay.
And then, yeah, so if you're typing something in and your VS Code keeps trying to recorrect it to something, it means that variable doesn't exist yet.
Okay. I see. So
You also probably do not need alphabet with the solution that you're picking.
I just need to put an I.J.
You don't need that either, because I and J are
Might just
defined on
result.
lines 9 and 10.
Oh, so here's just a result.
Yeah.
And then over here is going to be result.
Yeah, now you can see it doesn't give you problems.
Oh. And then in this parentheses, I'm going to do the string dot substring.
Mm-hmm. Not substring,
then,
substring, singular.
Not substring. And then you would put in I and J.
Yeah. and then you
Here,
would
here.
return result.
Oh, return result.
All right, and then go ahead and console log that substring at the end. So your line 22, yeah.
Console one substring.
Not
Function
quite.
substring.
Console log the result of line 22. There you go.
Go.
All
Oh, there
right.
you go.
So that looks kind of right.
But
So
D is
you can
not.
see
But D
now
is not there.
you've
D
got
is
some
not
of it.
there.
Yeah, the D's cut off. So why is the D cut off?
Why is the D cut off? Why is the D cut off?
So what I would recommend at this point then is look up the documentation for substring.
Okay. Ah, okay. The D is cut off because it doesn't take the last whatever
Yeah.
digit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if I put an E, I get A, B, C, D. Mm,
Yeah. But yeah,
um,
so that is kind of
does
what an
this work?
interview would be like. You no,
Does this
that would not
work?
work. If you're getting off by one errors, usually you change your for loop. So on line 10, I would make it j less than or equal to in that case.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes just fiddling around with that can work to see if that helps at all.
Oh, it
Yeah.
does work.
All right.
Oh,
Cool. Thank you for playing, Jerry. Good job.
please edit the video.
Handling nerves is really important in interviews,
What is
right?
nerves?
Um, yeah, so handling nerves, handling being nervous is really important. And there's the thing: interviewers know that you're going to be nervous. They know you're not bringing your A game. But yeah, round of applause for Jerry. Jerry did a good job.
Got it.
Jerry
I
did not
got the
pass the
answer at
interview,
the end. Oh, yeah, definitely not.
but that's okay. Because this is the sort of thing, each one of those things, like how to access an array, how to create a string, how to call functions, how to push, those are all things that you need to have memorized. Because those are the basics of the language, and those are the things that you're expected to just be able to regurgitate. Things like how to access a binary tree or how to use an object in this complicated algorithm, those are the things you should be struggling with. But definitely practice those basic concepts and get to the point where yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for playing, Jerry. So yeah, how do you handle nervousness? That's a really big thing. I get nervous in interviews still. They're kind of scary. They're things where you're like, hey, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Oh my god, I'm gonna fail this. Oh my god, I can't fail this. Oh my god, everyone's watching me. Everyone's looking at me. This is scary. It is scary. The thing I would go into it is every interview, what are you going to be able to take away from that interview? Will you be able to take away a job from that interview? Maybe, maybe not. And in fact, it's probably not because most companies don't hire you right on the spot. I've had that happen once where I went through the full interview and the guy came in and he was super funny about it. He goes, "So, let's just say that theoretically we were to offer you a job. Um, would you think you would accept that job?" And I was like, "Well, that depends. Are you offering me a job?" That's rare. That doesn't happen that often. Most likely, what it is they want to go back and actually have a meeting later on and talk with everyone, talk with the hiring manager, figure out all the stuff that's going on, and then they'll determine if they want to make you an offer. So you will walk away from that interview, and I guarantee you, you will not know if you have that job or not most of the time. I even like I've gotten jobs and like had them make offers that I didn't think I did very well in the interview. And I've had interviews I thought I've done very well and they didn't make me an offer. So you never know. You really don't, and it can take them a couple of days to get back to you. And that can be nerve-wracking on its own, but going into the interview, the thing to take away from it is if you're not doing well, what are they asking you that you're having trouble with? Are you having trouble understanding how to take what they asked you and turn it into an algorithm? Are you having trouble with the basics of the language? Are you having trouble understanding what they're asking you? Are you having trouble computing big O notation? Remember what that is, and that's what you need to practice. So, interviews, the first 10 interviews you do, you're probably not going to succeed. If you do succeed, that's excellent. And, I take those jobs. That's totally fine. But go into them expecting that you're not going to pass them because that helps with the nervousness. If you go into it saying, I'm not going to pass this, I'm going to learn. I'm here to learn what I don't know. What are they asking me that I need to learn? Go into that. And you know what? It's a time investment. Yeah. But you're also learning. So part of the nervousness around interviews can be like, if I don't get this job, I'm wasting my time. You're not, because you're learning. You're learning what you don't know. Don't worry about wasting their time either. If you go into an interview and you're like, gosh, if I don't do well on this, I've wasted six people's time. No, they're getting paid. They're getting paid to sit in a room with you, Zoom room or physical room, and watch you code. They are taking time out of their day, out of their projects, yeah, but they were gonna have to do that anyway. And they're getting paid for it. And like you may get to the point if you're at kind of a interviewing at kind of a toxic environment startup where they're like, yeah, that candidate was a waste of time. But that's rare. It's rare that they're like, oh, this candidate was a waste of time. It's more like they're going to say, I don't think we can move forward with this candidate. Most interviewers are not that shitty to just, dismiss you out hand like that. So you're not wasting their time because they are getting paid to sit with you and tell you what to code. You're not wasting your time because you are learning what is necessary to do that code. You might be wasting a little bit of the company's money, but you know what? They have money to spend. In a full, if they spend 6 hours, if you get to all the way to a final interview and they spend 6 hours of engineering time to interview you, that's going to be $500 for them, maybe a little bit more. That's not that much money for them. They spend that on coffee every week. They're not worried about that money. You shouldn't be either. So if you're worried that you're not going to show well, why do you think you're not going to show well? What do you think that you don't know about the interview? Use that. Write that down. If you get something and they say, okay, you need to do something like that project that we just went in, go back and be like, okay, why didn't I get that? And then try to finish it. Even if it takes you 3 hours later on, try to finish it if you don't fully get it. Because what that will teach you is valuable. What that teaches you about how to do it, and you'll be faster next time because next time you'll remember, oh, I know there was a function to do this. I need to get a string between I and j. I know there was a function to do this. Even if you don't remember exactly what it was, the next time you come across substring, you say, ah, that was the function. And I remember there was something weird about it, but I don't remember exactly what. Then you remember that j is exclusive. So that last character doesn't get counted. And so that's really all there is to it. Is the nervousness fades the more practice you get. You got to get the practice, and you just got to do interviews and learn, pick up the pieces, figure out what you don't know, remember that stuff. Like Jerry had a cheat sheet, totally fine. If you need to write down string dot substring just so you can remember, do it. Totally cool. Totally cool to do that. Your interviewer is not going to be upset about that if you're just like, okay, what I would do is have it as a text file and just have that text file and be like, okay, here's the notes I have of things I need to remember. If your interviewer doesn't like that, well, yeah, turn it down. But that's like not a very good interviewer, honestly. Um, they should be cool with that. So yeah, any questions from anyone on that little mock interview that we just had? No, nobody has any questions. Okay. Well, in that case, We could do a couple things from here. I could do another problem and just show you how it's done, show you a couple of techniques. We could do another mock interview with someone else. We could also do a culture interview if anyone wants. I've never actually given one of those, but I think I know enough questions to kind of give you an example of what you would have. Does anyone have any preferences on what they'd like to see? All right. Well, in that case, maybe I'll just talk about some culture stuff. So, a very common thing that people ask you in a culture interview is about previous experiences. So they'll be like, "So, I can see here you went to boot camp through UCB. Can you tell me about that?" And what they're looking at is they're looking for you to tell them the kind of things that you learned. So they want to hear you did React. They want to hear that you did Express, right? They want to hear that you've done those libraries. They want to know the big libraries that you've used. And they'll be like, "Oh, okay. Can you tell me about some of the projects that you worked on while you were at that boot camp?" And then they want you to tell them about the three big projects you worked on, right? They want, so for example, they want you to tell them about, like, oh yeah, I built this application that looked at a movie database and let users pick a time in a city, and it looked up a movie database and displayed the movie times, and then let them order some tickets and also order snacks ahead of time. Or maybe it stored that movie and let them share it with a person. Tell them the good things about that project. Don't tell them I couldn't work with my team very well because half of them didn't show up at all. That's not what you want to say. You want to tell them, like, yeah, we worked as a team, we got together, we had some challenges, but we overcame them to put a project out. That's the sort of stuff they want to hear. They want to hear that you can work on a team. They may give you scenarios. They may say something like, let's say that you were in this situation and you had this coworker who kept writing really crap code and you had to deal with it and you kept having to fix their code. What do you do in that situation? There's really not, there's a lot of right answers to that. There's a lot of wrong answers to that. I think as individuals, you probably can guess between the two, but give them a truthful answer, but don't give them a bad answer. Don't give them an answer like, I would go up to that coworker and I would pour jello all over their head. That's not a good answer. If you said, well, I would talk to them and try to see if we as a team can foster a culture of code review before we push stuff so that we can catch issues like this early. I would also see if they're open to mentoring or learning if they're a more junior engineer, and just see if they're open to willing to improvement and to take feedback. And if they're not, and it becomes a problem, and like I've kind of exhausted those outputs, I might go to my manager and say, hey, look, we've got a problem here, and see if the manager can reach out to them, because sometimes people respond better to managers than to their coworkers. So that's kind of an idea of like how you would do cultural interviews. There's not really a good solid format for them, because it's just kind of up to whoever wants to ask the question. Sometimes there will be more people. Another type of interview that I've never had to participate in ever, but I've heard of it, is a presentation interview. So they will actually give you some code or something or ask you to do something and then do a spreadsheet on it, and then you have to present it to a panel. It's not popular. Most engineers hate doing that. You will see that more often if you're doing like a design or stuff like that. So I don't anticipate you're going to run into that too much, but if you do see it, don't be super shocked. I have seen it come across once or twice. If you really want to do that interview, do your best. Honestly, personally, in my shoes, if someone said, yeah, and then we're going to have you do a presentation, I would just say, no, thank you. I'm not interested in this job anymore. But that's because I'm kind of an arrogant bastard. And also, I don't need the job. But in your cases, if you need the job, do the presentation, jump through the hoops, get the job. You know, do what they need you to do, even if it seems ridiculous, because the most important thing is getting that first job. That first job is absolutely vital, and figuring out like, oh, here's this job, I have this, you hold on to that for 6 months to a year, it becomes easier to get another job. Because your first job, when it right now, if a recruiter does their recruiter screen, they're going to say, oh, so you don't have any work experience. Tell me about your boot camp. Boot camps are very subjective in their experience. The one, well, I don't know exactly who's in the chat, but the one most of you went to is a pretty good one. I say that because I taught it. Uh, you know, not to toot my own horn, but it tried to give you a lot of the basics and understanding of what you were doing. Not all of them are that good. Some of them have instructors that don't want to teach you stuff. Some of them have curriculums where you don't learn very well. It's kind of hit or miss. So the recruiter isn't going to really get, like, it's going to be hard for them to get a good vibe of how well your skills are, which means you may actually be able to pass the technical, but you won't get to it because the recruiter doesn't want to take a chance on you. If you have a year of experience at a company, that recruiter feels much more comfortable taking that chance with you because they know that there's a company that has hired you and hasn't fired you for a year, which means that you're at least okay. And so then they'll ask you, tell me about your experience at that company. Tell me what you're doing there. And that just, the bar, the amount of chance they're willing to give you goes up significantly. Problem is getting that very first job. And were a bunch of programs out there that were designed exactly for that. They were designed for like, um, here's specifically a thing that is for boot camp grads, right? We know that you're going to have different skills from 4-year, and we want to make use of those. And so, like, kind of the interview bar is a little lower because they understand that like you're coming from a different place. So that can be helpful too. Those are not as popular anymore um, because the budget cuts and firing and all that stuff. Yeah, so a lot of those programs have been shut down. Some of them have not. Some of them are still going. So if you get one of those, that's a really good track because they'll hold on to you for a couple months at least, even if you don't make it through. And that can be used as work experience. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else you should. Does anyone have any questions on any of this? Any interviewing code, life of interviewing, life of developer stuff? I don't really have a set agenda past this point, so what did they ask about the gap between graduate and applying for an internship? Decided to take the internship job. That is possible. If they ask like why was there such a gap here, um, I mean the thing is for the recruiter, you shouldn't lie to them, but you can sugarcoat. So you can say like, oh, I decided to take a sabbatical. Or I was finishing up this other thing, or my current job, wanted to hold on to me for a little bit while I was ramping up. If you really want to, you can tell them, well, it just took me a long time to find my first job. Like that's legit. But I would say something more like, you know, something like that you took like maybe, oh, I was studying for those 6 months and just getting better with my code. That's not technically a lie, right? You were interviewing during that time, but you're also getting better at what you're doing. You could just say, I was trying to round out my portfolio with additional projects and make sure that everything was solid before I really started applying in earnest. And they may think that you're full of shit. They may buy it, but you don't have to completely like tell them the full truth of that. Like, I interviewed at 500 places and then it took the 501st one to get me a job. Yeah, you don't have to tell them that. If they ask you how many places you interviewed at, you should probably tell them that because you don't want to lie to them. But you can say a bunch of other things like, oh, I was just making sure I was learning, I was boosting my skills, I was making sure that I had everything solid, I was doing tutoring, whatever else is going on, because how's the recruiter going to check? Right? If you're like, yeah, I was just putting my portfolio into place and making sure I had good enough projects and making sure the code on my GitHub was up to my standards so that it looked, so that people would take it seriously. The interviewer doesn't know what your code or the recruiter doesn't know anything about code. They may go on your GitHub and look at some keywords, but they're not going to look at your code and be like, oh, yes, this code is definitely higher quality than it used to be 3 months ago. They're not going to check that. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to explain those gaps away. That is only going to work so far. If you are in a cultural screen with a senior software engineer and you tell them stuff like that, they will probably buy it too. But also, a senior software engineer doesn't give a shit. Like, I am never going to ask someone, can you explain this 12-month gap in your resume? Because I don't care. That's not my problem. I'm not, I who cares? Maybe you went to Europe. Maybe you just decided you didn't want to work for a year. That's not my problem. My problem is to determine whether or not you can still code. It's mostly going to be the recruiter or the cultural screen that's going to ask about that. And the only reason they're asking about that is they are trying to gauge whether or not other companies have deemed you to be unhireable. And so that's why, like, if you have a career and suddenly you have this block and it's unexplainable, that can be a bit of a yellow flag for them. If it took you a long time to find a job, especially in this market, that can be legitimate too. They're like, oh, it took you 12 months in between your boot camp to find a job, you could say, yeah, unfortunately, the job market was really bad at that point, and it took me a little while to get my skills to the point where companies would take me seriously. That's a legitimate answer. And especially if you're applying for your second or third job and you already have a job, they will usually accept that and be like, yeah, that's true. The job market was really bad back then. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, you got a company who's willing to hire you, so clearly you did that. You got your skills to the point where they take you seriously, which means I should take you seriously too. Now, if you're going for your first job and the recruiter's saying, hey, why is this taking you so long? That's a stupid question because they're a recruiter. They should be fully aware why it's taking so long to find a job. It is not an easy market right now. Like, that's a dumb question. And if a recruiter, like, for your very first job asks you that question, then you could give them the same answer, the job market is really tough right now. Or you could just tell them, well, I was building my skills. I was getting to the point where I felt comfortable interviewing. That's a legit answer because that's a dumb question for them to be asking you. But after that, after your first job, if you're up to your like fifth or sixth job and you've had a bunch of jobs in a row, then you can just tell them completely the truth for that question because they don't even care anymore. They might not even ask it. Um, but yeah, that's how I would explain away gaps. You can tell them the truth if the truth's not too bad, or you can tell them building your skills, learning, making sure your projects were good because that is what you should be doing while you're interviewing as well. Yeah, building your skills is totally legitimate to say. If you're not comfortable with how your skills are right now and you are actively building them, that is a fine answer to give. Just say, yeah, I was building up my skills till, working on personal projects till I got to the point that I felt comfortable. Absolutely. No big deal. They will usually take that and they will say, yeah, that's good. And they'll write that down in their notes and that'll go on to the hiring manager. But yeah, has anyone actually had any interviews or any prospects? All right, well, maybe let's try this. Let's take a look at maybe some job listings, and let's see if we can come up with anything interesting. Because I think that might be kind of valuable to look at as well. Let's look at Indeed. All right, this is a big job board. All right, and let's look for Whoops. Junior, well, sure, junior web developer. Let's take a look at just what's available out there. You received a code signal test. Yeah, 7 days. So that's a take-home project, right? That's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So that means you got past the recruiter screen. Have you done a tech screen yet, or was this the first time they've had you do anything technical? First time. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So that means that recruiter is taking a chance. And then, yeah, you get that task. They give you 7 days. 7 days is pretty decent. Yeah. Um, and yeah, once you do that, when you give them back that code, most often, sometimes it gets automatically graded. A lot of times it goes in front of the team that you're going to be working with, especially at a small company, and they actually look at the code you wrote and they all kind of give their comments on it. Um, so that can be really interesting. So I would definitely recommend put your best code forward. Um, Write comments, name your variables reasonably, make sure everything's indented well. Maybe even run it through a linter if you have the time, because there could be people looking over it to see, and they're expecting your best foot as well. But yeah, that's really cool. That's really exciting. Absolutely, I would love to hear that. All right, so let's take a look at this job here. This is with a company called Social Concepts in Redwood, Cal City. Redwood or Redwood City. This is probably Redwood City. That'd be my guess. Salary guide. That's a little low, honestly. Well, maybe this is Redwood. Where's Redwood? Is that actually a city? No, there's a city called Redwood. This is Redwood City. That is a little low for Redwood City. Um, Implement new site features and contribute to the continuing improvement of member experience. Refine existing code to current site needs and standards. Maintain awareness of best practices in LAMP and DHTML space. We got buzzwords. People love to put buzzwords in stuff. So maintain awareness of best practices in the LAMP and DHTML space. LAMP. What is LAMP? LAMP is Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. So this tells you immediately this is a PHP job. Now, as a junior engineer, you should probably still apply for this, even though you don't know PHP, because you could probably pick it up pretty quickly. DHTML stands for Dynamic HTML. That's just HTML. HTML, JavaScript, CSS, you all have that. Develop optimized cross-platform mobile-friendly front-end code. So this tells me it's a front-end position. Now here's the funny part. Front-end, but they're also LAMP stack, which means this might be a full-stack position, actually. Back-end and front-end. They don't seem like they say it here. Mobile friendly, that means you know how to build responsive designs. Convert mockups and graphics to functional layouts and pages. They probably use something like Figma or InVision or InDesign or Canva. Converting stuff from Figma, it's not hard. They basically want you to be able to take a design and write code for it. Not the hardest thing in the world, but it is something that takes some practice, right? Bachelor of Science in Computer Science or related discipline. So here's where you start to have problems. This company, and to be fair, I would apply on this anyway. But this company doesn't say or related experience. That's kind of what they would want. If you say BS in computer science or related experience, that means that they're saying if you have a boot camp, please apply. This is saying we want you to have a degree. Not great. Now here's the thing: apply for it anyway. Especially with a site like Indeed, they will take all of your information that you've already put in and forward it to them. If it's easy, just apply. If they're comfortable and this is just written by someone who didn't fully understand what they were doing, then they'll let you through. They'll be like, yeah, okay, this is equivalent. If they just say no, you don't have a Bachelor of Science, they'll just reject it outright, and their system might not even accept it. So there's no real harm in that unless you have to type a bunch of information over and over again. Do not lie and say that you have a Bachelor of Science. There are ways to check that. They can call your university and say, we are doing employment verification. Did this person graduate with this degree? That is a thing that employers will do. If it's certain things, they'll do a background check on you. And that background check will bring up all the previous places you have worked and all the degrees and schools that you went to. If you do not actually have that degree, do not tell them that you have that degree, because that will be bad. Even if you get the job and they find out that you lied, Not only will they fire you, they will blacklist you because now they know that you are a liar, and that's not a reputation you want to have. So you can apply for this job, just don't tell them that you have the Bachelor of Science. 1 year hands-on experience with the following technologies: PHP, Ajax, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery. See, now here's the thing. Those of you who have gone to the bootcamp, you have most of these. We've done Ajax, that's fetch requests. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, you have done that. You do not have PHP. That's okay. You meet most of these criteria. That 1 year plus, ignore that. That is just them saying, "Oh, we'd like you to have a year of experience." Apply anyway. You know, you can count the boot camp as 6 months of experience if you need to. Then, if you have another 6 months of experience doing stuff, that's fine. It doesn't have to be 1 year of experience in the industry. They would like it if you came to them and you actually have 1 year of experience with this. That moves you to the top of their list. But not having all of these does not push you off their list. You don't have to have 100% of these criteria. Like, for example, if you just had all these criteria, they don't care if you don't know jQuery. You can learn it. All this, they don't care if you don't know PHP. You can learn it. If you have none of these, then they're going to be a little annoyed. If you only have PHP, they might have a problem. But you've got most of these skills, so you're going to be okay. Object-oriented development, concepts, and design. We have covered those. Definitely practice that. Now, here's the thing. You know what this company's looking for if you apply for this. If you get an interview with them, practice those concepts. Classes, functional classes, constructor classes. I think we covered factory functions. Cover all those things. Make sure you're passively familiar with them because they may ask you about them. These strong written communication skills, I have never seen a job posting that does not have that requirement. That just basically means you can talk to people, you know, and that'll come out in the culture map. Debugging and quality assurance skills, that means that you understand if things go wrong with your code, how to fix them. Capacity to balance workload, priorities, and deadlines in a dynamic work environment. That's a yellow flag right there. What that means is they are expecting you to not maintain a valid, good work-life balance. Capacity to balance workload, priorities, and deadlines in a dynamic work environment. That means if we give you a deadline that is unreasonable, we expect you to meet it. So this is a sort of thing, still apply, but this is not going to be a great work environment. Because of that, you know, that means that they are going to be pushing you quite hard and they're going to be expecting you to work late hours, very likely. But it's a job. It's a job. You stick there for a couple years, then you find a better job. You need a job right now. You need that first job. Nice to haves. Prior experience to relevant large-scale websites, working knowledge of, hey, look, you have MySQL. You have also worked with handlebars, which is probably similar to the Smarty templating system. Flash development. Now, the thing that I think is really cool about these things, this is the stuff that you might learn at this job. They may teach you how to do Flash development, which is really fucking weird because Flash is dead. Nobody uses Flash anymore. So the fact that they're using Flash is kind of funny to me. But, you know, they do something in Flash. They'll teach you a template system. They may teach you email messaging standards and protocols. That could be useful. Ability and desire to quickly learn and adapt to new languages and techniques. This should be all of you. You should have that ability and desire. And this is also boilerplate. Ability to work independently as well as within a team, drive features to completion. That's every job description has that. What that basically means is, can you write code and can people get along with you? And can you write code on a team? Which most of you can. Principals only know recruiters. That basically means that they only do in-house recruiting. They don't want a recruiter that you're working with to submit on your behalf. All right. Also posted 30 plus days ago and they haven't filled it yet, which means they might be getting a little desperate for candidates. Social concepts. What does social concepts do? Let's take a look. That's not what I want. I want their website. Social concept It's Redwood City. Social concepts. We connect people. This is interesting. Social concepts 2000. They've been around a while actually, with the mission of connecting people on the internet. Let's see. If you look at careers, they'll give you more stuff here. They still have this intermediate up. The fact this is still actually up and it's been a month means that they might be kind of desperate. Meet us. This tells you the people that are there, a couple of them. Um, wow, this person co-founded Hot or Not. Okay. So here's the thing. This person has a PhD from UCB. That could be an in because you have a certificate from UCB. So we have 3 people. They all their names start with J. This is the founder of this place. Here. They don't have a lot of their staff. They have these people, which might mean that this is the only 3 people and they're looking for a 4th. These are the options that you have where like this might be kind of a small company. Their website's kind of interesting. Their website also doesn't have a HTTP SSL certificate on it, which tells me that these guys might not understand front end very well. The other thing you can look at, let's inspect their website. Put stuff here later. I love it. This is definitely not Flash. This looks very, very, very simple, right? This looks very simple, very clean. They're not using any frameworks for this, which tells me that they might be looking for someone that knows modern web frameworks because they might not know them themselves. So that can be something. Yeah. Any other questions on that listing? Anything that you guys saw that you want me to talk about? Oh, wait a minute. So people can like type. Because here we only have typing. All right. Let's take a look at another one. Let me see. Yeah. So let's take a look. Junior back. This one also said intermediate junior, which means they're looking for both or either. This one's junior. This salary is better too. We Pro Limited. I've heard that name before. Full time. You also get contract occasionally. Contract is not terrible. Companies are often a lot more willing to take a risk with contract because there's a definite end date, which means that if you turn out to not be as good as they think, they can just get rid of you at the end of that date. The reason this is all good for you is because contract counts as work experience, and you need work experience. 92 to 117K. That's much more what I would expect for a that might be why this has been open for a month too. That's a very low salary. This is what I would expect for a junior engineer salary. This is pretty on par with the Bay Area. They have here's what we do: leading technology services and consulting company. Blah 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 blah. Basically, they're looking for people that they will contract out. They build solutions for people for other companies that are too small to build their own. This wouldn't be a terrible place to work, honestly, for a couple years. They probably have their shit together because they're so large. 75 years, lots of revenue. 60. What this tells you too is they're not just a flash in the pan startup. They're not going to be around and like go bankrupt in 2 years. Going bankrupt in 2 years as a startup, not a big deal. But startups also, their work is sometimes like work-life balance isn't that great. Understanding of cloud services with experience in AWS and a private cloud. Understand cloud underlying API usage. Develop using Golang, Python, and Java. Y'all don't have any of that. But if you learn Java, you could apply for this. You have managed SQL and NoSQL. You haven't worked with Redis, but you have worked with Mongo. And if you worked with Mongo, Redis isn't that hard. You have developed schemas. You have written data APIs, not multi-server applications. And you do know agile methodologies and continuous integration, even though it's the sort of thing that that we didn't cover that much. We did cover it a little bit, and it's a thing to look into. So, can you do this? Not all of it. Should you apply still? Maybe. Now we get down here. 2 years of experience in developing backend services and APIs for cloud-based enterprise application. Python, Go. There's so many typos in this. Golang. And Java, NoSQL databases, etc. You have worked with NoSQL databases. You don't have 2 years of experience, but you could apply for that anyway. Because if they're impressed enough with how you interview, the 2 years is, they're not going to worry about too much. You have experience writing RESTful web services, proxies, and APIs. You don't have this. That's okay. I don't know why they put 3 question marks on that. That's a little weird. Definitely experience with NoSQL databases and data modeling. Not this. Not microservices, but that is an interesting thing to learn. No Kafka. REST experience, yes. This is pretty much boilerplate, right? Excellent communication skills. Secondary skills. Web application firewall, no. Web architecture and protocols, HTML, DOM, JS, HTTP. Yeah, you guys know HTML, DOM, and JS, right? So you know those things. The rest of them you can pick up. Developing containerized applications, no, but that's okay. Here's the thing. They're not going to find many junior developers that have all these skills. Because if someone has all these skills, they're very quickly not a junior developer anymore. So you should apply. You can apply to this, even though you probably have half the skills listed on here, because they're just throwing out a buzzword salad, right? They may do a recruiter screen and say, nah, you don't know this stuff, blah, blah, blah. That's okay. But also, this has been posted quite a while ago, and they still haven't taken it down, which means they haven't managed to hire anyone for this role. And the reason they haven't managed to hire anyone for this role is because very few people have all these things. So you have enough of these things, you can apply for this, and they will teach you the rest. If you don't know some of this stuff and you're worried about that, learn AWS. You could learn some of that stuff just enough to like answer some of the basic questions, and the recruiter will let you through. Remember, the recruiter doesn't know this stuff either. So as long as you know enough to textbook answer their questions, they'll let you through. And the engineering person will be like, do you know JavaScript? Okay. But this is why, the other thing, this is why it's useful to know more than one language. Because let's say you know JavaScript, Python, and Java. They don't care that you don't know Golang. They know that you know the other 3 languages, so they'll be able to teach you Golang. Golang's not too hard either. If you just know JavaScript, then you start getting locked out of opportunities like this. If you know Java, yeah, they'll hire you. That you know Java, you can learn Python and Golang. If you learn JavaScript, yeah, so pick up a second language. That's a big one. What else do we have? Oh, there's only 2 junior web developers. Well, let's check junior. Let's just look up junior developer, because that was junior web developer. Just search junior developer. Okay, we get that one. Ooh, this is an interesting one. Angular JS, Node.js, Mobistreak. Okay. San Jose, full time. That's a little on the low end, but not terrible. Right? Oh, wow. We are looking for a talented junior developer from premier schools to join our product team. Well, here's the fun thing. You can apply for this job because they have not given any criteria at all. You know Node.js, you could learn Angular because you know React. They need junior developer from premier schools. Well, where have you got your certificate from, or will get it, once Nick gets through his mountain of emails to actually send them to you? You have a certificate from UCB. That's a premier school. They didn't say you had to have a bachelor's. They just said you had to come from that school, which you've done. You can apply for this. What is Mobistreak? Because that's a terrible job posting. Mobistreak, digital media agency. Oh, I feel like I know where this is. All right, so let's see if I go to, not get proposal. They should have a careers page somewhere. Their website looks nice enough. Oh God, what is this? Okay, well they need help. Product engineering, let's see, junior, here we go. Oh my God. This would be an interesting company to work for, honestly. What is their website built in? You can always tell. Okay, so the NG content, this is an Angular site because of that NG. You can tell. Let's just look at the head here. Yeah, Google Tag Manager, scripts. There. So I'm just trying to find their scripts to see if I can pick up something. No, not really. But yeah, this looks like an Angular site, which makes sense because they're asking you to do Angular and Node.js. So yeah, that could be an interesting one. Junior software engineer. Main responsibility: develop and qualify software for server storage network interface cards with TCP accelerator. Work with customers, provide support for them. Strong in C programming. Probably not. This one particularly, I would say, if you want to do this one, learn C, learn Java. They might take you for Java. If you know JavaScript, there's no way they're gonna let you take this job. C and JavaScript are very, very different languages. They share some things, very different languages. So this is one. If you see anything where they're like specifically C or C++, that's something that you're going to need to learn a couple more things to apply for. Also, this is a lot of like very low level. They're probably doing embedded systems programming, which could be very interesting. Embedded systems programming actually pays quite well, but your skill set doesn't translate to that yet because the bootcamp that you went through taught you how to do full stack web development. This is not that. But still, this is the sort of thing where you're like, oh, there's a lot of jobs like this. What do you need to learn? What do you need to pick up in order to be considered for those jobs? C, learning how to build low-level server software. That's a thing you could pick up, especially if you have 12 months to do it. Software engineer junior, which is different from a junior software engineer, apparently. Health insurance tuition reimbursement is kind of interesting. On-site, Santa Clara, occasional telework, all phases of software development, requirements design, analysis, design, code, test, and documentation. You guys have done that with your projects. Learn these functions, including developing and understanding tactical data. See, these are not things that they're saying you need to have done already. They're saying things that you will do. If you have done them, that's helpful. I don't know what that is. You're going to learn if you get this job, though. Program processes and procedures, contribute to quality assurance team. Oh, so this is a QA role. Okay. Participate in agile ceremonies. We covered that a little bit. That's the sort of thing you just learn. Technical exchange meetings, trainings. This is more of a QA dome role. That's kind of interesting. Acquired experience. Bachelor of Science. So this is interesting. What is an HS? What is HS in this case? Bachelor of Science, 2 years of HS. Does that stand for high school? That doesn't make sense. If that would stand for high school. But this is something where you see they're like, we don't necessarily just require you to have a bachelor's. We will take you if you have some other experience too. On the other hand, they require you to know C++ or C# and C#. So another one where learning C++ might be nice. Office products, relational databases, you have that. You don't have this, but that's okay. Complex algorithms, this is the sort of thing that you're going to be learning, right? To pass your stuff. Quality control, analytical skills, that comes along with the algorithms. That's funny. That's actually really interesting. You don't see this very often. But this basically means that you can't have like committed felonies or I think like you can't be like a green card holder necessarily as well. So that's something to keep in mind too. So yeah, this is if this is something you're interested in, they look like they work with like cybersecurity and stuff, which could be really interesting. But again, that's C++, C and C++. So you can see there's almost like two camps of this stuff, right? There's the web development jobs, which involves like Java, Python, PHP, JavaScript, stuff like that. And then there's the C, C++. And those are different camps. And if you know C, C++, you can work in both. C, C++ it's very efficient. So people that are like JavaScript is not very efficient of a language. C++ is a very efficient language. C even more so. So these guys are doing a lot of embedded stuff or stuff that's meant to run very, very quickly. Algorithms will be very important here. I have here junior mid software engineer, tech company, e-commerce. This is good. E-commerce, machine learning, junior mid full stack engineer. Junior mid is kind of more like you have a job as a junior engineer and you've been there like a year or so. So this might not be the best for y'all. Collaborative product design teams, receive mentoring, participate in decisions, suggest improvements to company culture actions are in the code. We love refactor and do not believe in code perfection, but clean code culture is something we value. This is a good sign. This is a green flag. Because there are some companies and some teams that very much have the idea of like once something's written, it's set in stone and please don't change it. Skills and experience, full stack JavaScript. This is good because you're full stack JavaScript. Node.js with Express and React.js with style components. We use es.next. We always use es.next. I don't know what that means. But that's why minimum knowledge of these technologies would be very valuable. You all have that knowledge. We used to work in a this was written by someone for whom English is a second language, I think. Not that that's a big deal. Just keep that in mind. That like culture interviews may reflect that. Post-agile culture, we're looking for responsible people. This is interesting. Post-agile culture. I haven't heard that before. I wonder what that means. Post-agile culture. Post-agile, in-between period. Yeah, I know what that means. What is post-agile? Okay, well, this is continuous delivery. I don't know. I want to watch a YouTube video right now. Post-agile culture is kind of interesting. That makes me think they're expecting you to take on load, and there might not be as much support. Communication is a much multicultural team, living in different time zones. Be responsible for communication and raise your hand if something seems not working or can be improved. We also need mid-high English level. I would say everyone that I've met at our boot camp and our cohort is able to write it at least the level that they have in this job description, so you're probably going to be fine. Proactive people want to improve our culture of values. This could be an interesting one, honestly. Helpful skills experience, nothing. This could be a very interesting one because they definitely, so you can see full stack JavaScript. You need to know this stuff. You need to be good at this stuff. And given their salary band, which isn't, I mean, it's good, but it's not amazing. Like a mid full stack engineer is not going to work for this salary. They're going to want a little bit more. A lot of these things y'all meet, this could be a good one for you as well. Anyway, any questions on any of these? Any other final questions people have? Because we are kind of coming up on time. But I hope this is helpful. Reading through these things can be kind of intimidating, but you notice most of these you can apply for. If you have some of the technologies, you can apply for them. The main thing is there's certain languages, C, C++, C#, Objective-C, they work so differently from how JavaScript works that I would definitely recommend learning those before you apply for those kind of jobs. But Java, Python, JavaScript was kind of born from Java in a lot of ways, even though it's different in some ways. And Python and PHP are not hard to pick up if you know JavaScript. So those languages, if they require those, you could try to apply with JavaScript. Your goal then is to convince them that you can learn. Yeah. Anyway, I'll wait for a minute in case anyone has any questions. Also because I started like 2 minutes early, so. Yeah, and it's totally okay if no one has questions. I'm not offended by that. But I hope you got something valuable. I hope you got something valuable out of this. And I might do a couple more. Some of these streams, I know a lot of people wanted to do interviewing stuff and learn about that, so that's why I did the stream on here. Streams moving forward may do some interviewing prep. We may do some other stuff. There's a couple streams where I just want to like go over some code tactics, just do some live coding, see how people jive with that. But if you want to affect that, there is a survey in the announcements channel on Discord. Please fill it out. That survey does provide us with information of what kind of stuff you are looking for, so that helps me tailor content in a way that is useful for everyone to have. All right. Well, I think that's everything. I hope this was useful. If this was not useful, or you wanted to see something else, please let me know. But yeah, this is it's hard interviewing stuff. But good luck. Please let me know how it goes. Let me know if you get interviews, how they turn out for you, stuff like that. I would love to hear it. But yeah, we'll talk to y'all soon. Have a good one and good luck.